TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot. Today, TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Emily Harper sat in the passenger seat of her parents' car, gripping an envelope so tightly her knuckles turned white. Outside, the sun had barely risen over suburban Columbus, Ohio. But her thoughts were a whirlwind. Just 2 hours ago, she and her fiancé, Josh Bennett, had exchanged vows in a modest chapel downtown. Now, Emily, only 23, was about to take her first steps into the Bennett family home as their daughter-in-law. Emily's parents, Helen and Mark Harper, had been devastated when she announced her unexpected pregnancy during her senior year of college. Their plans, like everyone's plans, had changed overnight. Now, driving along quiet streets, Helen glanced at her daughter in the mirror. "Honey," she said softly, "you're doing the right thing. Josh loves you." Emily forced a smile. Josh Bennett, age 24, leaned forward in the driver's seat, his hand brushing against Emily's on the center console. He avoided her gaze, likely for fear of breaking down. The rapid crash wedding had been his idea. He couldn't bear the thought of Emily going through her final trimester alone. Still, seeing her so pale and anxious cradling her tummy struck a chord of guilt in his chest. Their destination loomed ahead, a 2-story colonial with white siding, black shutters, and a pristine lawn edged by tulips and azaleas. Josh parked, cut the engine, and let out a breath. He glanced at Emily, who was struggling to open the car door as her maternity dress pressed against her bump. He quickly unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned over to help her. She nodded a silent "thank you," then hobbled toward the front porch. Margaret Bennett, Josh's mother, appeared at the top of the porch steps just as Emily reached for the doorknob. Margaret, 52, wore a floral-patterned blouse and a severe expression that matched her neatly pinned brown hair. She barely acknowledged Helen and Mark as they followed behind their daughter. Instead, her gaze stayed riveted on Emily. "Emily," Margaret began, voice clipped, "you will enter the house through the back door. This is how it has to be." Emily froze, hand still on the doorknob. Off to one side, Josh's father, Robert Bennett, materialized from around the corner of the house. He was 56, with thinning gray hair and a gentle posture, hardly the sort of man who would enforce household rules with an iron fist. Robert cleared his throat. "Margaret," he said in a calm baritone, "I don't agree with insisting she use the back door. We have nothing to fear." Margaret turned on him, eyebrows raised. "Bob, you know our traditions. I consulted the family's spiritual advisor last night. He insisted that a daughter-in-law who is expecting must not step over the threshold until the baby is born." Robert shook his head. "That is superstition, Maggie. Emily is family now." Helen stepped forward, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Mrs. Bennett, I understand your concerns, but my daughter is feeling vulnerable. Can we at least talk about this?" Margaret offered only a slight nod, as if to say, "Talk. Yes, but things will remain the same." She turned back toward the driveway. "You two," she said to Josh and Emily, "please use the side door. I'll be in the kitchen." Emily's heart sank. She exchanged a quick glance with Josh, who simply shrugged as if to say, "I'm sorry." Emily whispered to her mother, "I'll be okay." Helen patted her hand and followed her in through the side gate. Inside, the Bennett household was quiet except for the ticking of a large, brass-cased wall clock. The hardwood floors gleamed under soft overhead lights. Too many questions buzzed in Emily's mind, but she took a deep breath and stepped forward. As soon as she closed the door behind her, a firm tap on the front door announced that Robert was inviting himself back in. He moved to the foyer, opened the front door wide, and called softly to Margaret. "Margaret, dear, I'm letting Emily and Helen in through the front. Tradition or not, family first." Margaret rounded the corner from the kitchen, expression hard to read, but she allowed Robert to proceed. Emily felt a sudden pang of gratitude for his small gesture. In the kitchen, a pot of coffee percolated on the stove. The large oak table was set for 7, though one place would be empty for a short while, as Robert had to return to work on some lesson plan he'd promised his former high school students. In the center of the table, a flower arrangement of white lilies and blue hydrangeas gave the room a dignified air. Emily's steps were tentative as she approached the kitchen island. She offered a soft, "Good morning, Mrs. Bennet." Margaret's response was curt, "Sit down. We'll have breakfast in a moment." Josh hovered nearby, looking every bit the uncertain son-in-law. Helen took a seat at the table. Mark, who had stayed behind, offered a reassuring smile to Emily. As Margaret busied herself with brewing coffee, Emily and Helen found seats next to each other at the table. Josh sat at the head, shoulders hunched as though he were 14 again. Robert returned from the foyer, carrying briefcase and coat, and immediately met Emily's eyes. His silent nod said, "You're welcome here." Soon, breakfast, a simple spread of scrambled eggs, turkey bacon, and whole wheat toast, was served. Margaret stood over Emily's plate, adjusting the arrangement of pieces, as if inspecting a painting. Finally, she nodded. "That will do," she said, and took a seat. Emily's appetite had vanished, but she picked at her toast beside Josh, who kept glancing down at his plate and then up at her. Finally, Emily dared to break the tense silence. "Thank you for letting us use the front door," she murmured to Margaret. Margaret merely raised an eyebrow and moved a piece of bacon. "Don't let me tell you twice," she said. Robert leaned forward and placed a gentle hand atop Emily's. "You're part of this family now," he said in his calm, measured voice. "I want you to feel welcome." Emily felt an unexpected relief wash over her, like stepping from a cold, drafty hallway into a room warmed by a fireplace. Mark Harper cleared his throat. "I want to invite you both to come by our house this afternoon for a proper celebration," he said. "We've prepared something special." Josh glanced at his mother, who showed no hesitation. Margaret's expression was neutral, but her silence seemed to grant permission. Josh turned back to Emily, uncertainty softening his features. "After classes today, we can all go together if you'd like," he offered. Emily felt a flutter of hope. Maybe relationships could be mended, bit by bit. But at the same time, the reality of her situation pressed down like a weight on her collarbone. She swallowed and mustered a small smile. "That sounds nice," she said. As the family continued to eat, the tension gradually eased. Robert shared a story about a student who had recently graduated, eliciting chuckles from all around the table. Josh laughed, then reached out to dab Emily's brow with a napkin. Helen reached a hand across the table and squeezed Emily's. Margaret, despite her reserved manner, let out a quiet sigh, as though acknowledging a concession to peace. Though Emily was still the new daughter-in-law, expectant and facing traditions she did not entirely understand, Robert's small act of kindness had begun to open a bridge to acceptance. And as Emily looked from the bright morning light filtering through the kitchen windows to the faces of her new family, she realized she was not entirely alone. In those first moments, a fragile harmony had been struck. Emily, mindful of her unborn child and anxious for a fresh start. Josh, determined to protect his family despite his own mistakes. Margaret, clinging to traditions even as she glimpsed Emily's vulnerability. And Robert, gently guiding them all toward unity. That morning, as Emily set aside her empty plate, she understood the challenges ahead. Yet at this very table, she glimpsed the possibility of belonging. And, as the clock on the wall ticked softly, she silently vowed to do whatever it took to protect her child, and, perhaps, to win a place in the Bennet family's heart. The sun climbed higher outside, promising a new day, one filled with both fear and potential. But for now, Emily let herself believe that, under this roof, amidst the clattering of dishes and the warm hum of conversation, a family could, slowly but surely, find common ground. As the last piece of toast vanished from the table and Robert Bennet polished off his coffee, he stood and looked toward his son.
"Josh."
"Emily, let's head over to the Harpers for that second introduction. Your parents have prepared a little get-together for us this afternoon. Josh nodded, offering Emily a quick, reassuring glance. Yes, Dad. Margaret, who had been quietly observing from the head of the table, stiffened. This is unnecessary, she said, folding her napkin. We've already been introduced. Robert placed a gentle hand on Margaret's arm. Tradition or not, Emily is family. Helen and Mark have been so gracious, and I want to show our proper respect. He smiled at Emily. Let's give them that courtesy. Emily felt her pulse quicken. This was her first real opportunity to step into Emily's childhood home alongside Josh, rather than from behind the tense threshold of the Bennett household. Her mother, Helen, set her coffee cup down. We're happy you two are coming, she said with warmth. My folks have baked a pie, just a small family gathering, really. Margaret exchanged a silent look with Josh before nodding curtly. Though her face remained impassive, Emily sensed a subtle shift. Robert had prevailed. The Harper family home sat 2 suburbs over, a modest brick house with ivy creeping up one wall, a front porch swing, and a neatly trimmed lawn. As they pulled into the driveway around 2:30 p.m., Emily felt a flutter of nerves. Every instinct told her to proceed gently, to keep her head down, and to avoid misstepping in front of Helen and Mark's parents, whom she'd met only briefly at baby showers and holiday gatherings in the past. Helen greeted them at the front door with a bright smile. Emily.
Josh.
So glad you could make it. Come on in, Grandma and Grandpa are waiting in the living room. Helen's face radiated genuine affection as she guided them past the small foyer, where a golden retriever, Scout, wagged his tail furiously, greeting them with gentle licks. Scout's presence eased Emily's tension. She remembered how he nuzzled her tummy the first time she visited, back when she had not yet revealed her pregnancy. They entered a spacious living room decorated in warm autumnal hues, burnt orange throw pillows, a framed family portrait on the mantel, and a hardwood floor streaked with fading sunlight. Grandpa Harold Harper, age 75, sat comfortably in a recliner, his silver hair neatly combed, and a small pair of reading glasses perched halfway down his nose as he surveyed Emily with keen, bright eyes. Next to him on a cushioned love seat, Grandma Doris Harper, 73, folded and refolded a pastel quilt. When she spotted Emily, her stern expression melted into a soft smile. Emily, dear, come give your grandmother a hug. Doris beckoned, patting the cushion at her side. Emily approached carefully, mindful of her pregnant belly, and gave her grandmother a gentle embrace. Harold set aside a sports magazine.
Josh.
Good to see you again, he rumbled in a warm baritone. You better not be late to Coach Jonathan's football game this Saturday. Josh laughed, relaxing for the first time since arriving. No chance of that, Grandpa. Emily felt a wave of relief. This was her mother's parents, after all, and they clearly loved her grandson. She lowered herself onto an armchair next to Doris, who gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Mark Harper emerged from the kitchen carrying a steaming pecan pie. Behind him was Helen's mother's flour-dusted apron. Karen Abbott, 68, set the pie on the coffee table, then hugged Helen before turning to Emily. Sweetheart, you look radiant. How's the baby? Emily placed a hand on her bump. She's doing well. Grandma Karen. Thank you. The front door opened once more as Grace Harper Bennett, their 14-year-old daughter, bounded in, backpack on one shoulder.
Mom.
Mom, she exclaimed, rushing forward. When she saw Emily's slightly rounded belly, Grace gasped. Wait, baby sister? Helen beamed. Yes, honey. Grace's eyes widened. She glanced at Josh. Dad, why didn't you tell me it was official? Josh knelt to Grace's level, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I thought we'd surprise you today. How do you feel about a baby sister? Grace's face broke into a radiant grin. She did a small spin. I think it's going to be awesome. Margaret Bennett, guided in last by Robert, perched hesitantly on a small ottoman in the corner. At first, her composure was stiff, as though she were sizing up the scene. But when Grace introduced her with obvious affection, Grandma Margaret, Margaret offered a small nod, then turned serious. "Good afternoon," she said. Doris Abbott rose and moved to embrace Margaret. "Oh, Margaret, it's been too long." They kissed cheeks, the two women exchanging a cordial greeting. Harold directed everyone to the dining room table, which held a spread of coffee, tea, and fresh-baked cookies. The scent of warm butter and cinnamon drifted through the air as plates were passed around. "Please have a seat, everyone," Harold said, clearing his throat. "I'd like to propose a toast." He picked up a glass of iced tea. "To family, old and new. We've known Josh here since he was just a boy chasing his little sister around the yard. And now, Emily, you're part of our family." He lifted his glass higher. "Welcome, officially." Emily's heart swelled as she raised her glass of sparkling apple cider.
Thank you, Grandpa.
"I feel very lucky." Margaret held up her own glass. "To Emily and the baby, may both bring joy to this family." Her voice was measured, but in her eyes Emily glimpsed a complex mixture of acceptance and lingering reservation. Emily returned the toast, then looked at Josh, who squeezed her hand. Grandpa Harold then cleared his throat theatrically. "Now, there is one singular matter to address. Emily and Josh. This afternoon we have a little family photo session in the backyard. Outfits are coordinated, so be prepared. Karen has gathered everyone's favorite sweaters and jeans." Josh rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "I knew there had to be a catch." Laughter broke out around the table. Emily felt a genuine warmth. These were her people, mother's family, coming together. Even Margaret, after a small hiccup over her backdoor rule, allowed herself a single, half-smile. After the toast, Karen led Emily into the kitchen for a quick chat. "Emily, dear, I made your favorite apple cinnamon tea. Please let me know if you need anything." She tucked a curl of hair behind Emily's ear. Emily placed a grateful hand on the counter. "Thank you, Mrs. Abbott. It smells wonderful." Margaret, overhearing them, touched Emily's arm. "I appreciate how hard you're working to keep everyone comfortable," she said in a low voice, proof that, despite her strict exterior, she recognized Emily's efforts. Emily nodded, surprised by this unexpected acknowledgement. Out in the living room, Grace practiced baby coos with Scout the golden retriever nuzzling at her side. Josh leaned in close to his mother. "Mom, don't worry about everything. Emily's wonderful." Margaret's gaze softened. "I know he loves you, Emily." The words, quiet, sincere, felt like a milestone. Helen, standing in the archway between living room and kitchen, smiled with relief. For the first time, the two families, Harper and Bennett, felt threads of unity weaving between them. Just then, Harold announced, "Ladies, if you'll follow me outside, we'll begin our photo shoot." The front door opened wide, revealing the lawn bathed in soft afternoon sun. Children's laughter drifted in from a nearby yard, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fall leaves. Margaret paused to examine Emily's dress, a soft gray maternity style with delicate embroidery near the neckline. She nodded approvingly. Emily felt as if a silent bond had been sealed. The families spilled onto the backyard lawn, gathering near a wooden swing set draped with strings of fairy lights. As the camera clicked and shuttered, Robert Bennett directed the group. "Okay, Josh. Stand next to Emily. Grace, hold onto Emily's other hand. Margaret, stand right behind. Nod happily." For a moment, everything felt perfect. Emily, cradling her belly, Josh, with one arm around Emily's waist, Grace on one side, Margaret on the other, Helen and Mark standing proudly behind Grace, and Doris and Harold forming the outer circle with Robert. The golden afternoon light illuminated their smiles, capturing a tableau of generational harmony. When the final shot was taken, heads clustered close, nobody spoke. The silence was comfortable, proof that, here in this Harper backyard, family ties had grown stronger, bridging the gap between old traditions and new beginnings. Emily realized this was not just a photo, it was a promise of mutual respect and shared joys. As they strolled back toward the house, Emily offered Margaret a gentle nod. Margaret, once so adamant about back doors and rules, simply nodded back. No words were needed. This day had stitched together the Harper and Bennett families in a way that only shared love, small gestures, and honest acceptance could. When Emily and Josh finally left, driving back to the Bennett home in the soft glow of late afternoon, Emily felt the knot of anxiety that had sat in her chest since dawn began to loosen. Joshua reached over and squeezed her hand, and for the first time, they both believed they might find their way through any challenge, one step at a time. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily, daughter, wife, soon-to-be mother of two, looked toward the future with a cautious but hopeful heart. For in that afternoon's simple gathering, the seeds of a blended family's trust were sown, ready to grow through every trial yet to come. 2 months after that second introduction, Emily Harper found herself stepping into a new rhythm of days that felt both familiar and completely foreign. The Bennett household had settled into its early autumn routine. Josh headed off to his marketing job at 7:30 each morning. Emily prepared bottles and diapers before sitting down to breakfast with Margaret and Robert. And then Emily would pack up baby Grace, now 7 months old, to drop her off at a small daycare run by a retired schoolteacher just a few miles away. That first week after Grace's arrival, Emily's world narrowed to feedings, late-night diaper changes, and quiet moments spent rocking her daughter to sleep. She'd never imagined how deeply love and exhaustion could intertwine. Meanwhile, Margaret Bennett, ever the traditionalist, watched Emily's every move as if evaluating a delicate, complicated puzzle. When Emily tried to feed Grace the same organic formula recommended by the pediatrician, Margaret hovered at her shoulder. "Emily," she said softly one morning, "do you think this formula is quite rich enough for her? Maybe I should show you how I used to prepare bottles back when Josh was an infant." Emily, exhausted yet determined not to cause offense, smiled politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Bennett. Dr. Lee said this brand is perfectly balanced, but I appreciate your offer." Margaret nodded, back straightening. "Of course. Just trying to help." Over the next few weeks, the pattern repeated itself. Emily would set out to prepare Grace's 6 p.m. bottle, only to feel Margaret's gaze at her back. If the minivan doors didn't close quietly enough, Margaret would murmur, "Grace needs a peaceful environment. We don't want to startle her." Most young mothers might bristle at that sort of thing. But Emily's heart softened when she thought of her daughter's needs, and when she remembered how confused Margaret had seemed at their rushed wedding. In those moments, Emily reminded herself, this is her son. She's trying to make sense of things, too. Elsewhere, Josh began to settle into a new routine as well. At age 26, he had recently been promoted to junior account executive at Rise and Shine Media, a small but growing boutique marketing agency downtown. He worked long hours on ad campaigns and social media strategies, and sometimes Emily found empty pizza boxes waiting on the counter. On such nights, Margaret, who prided herself on being a homemaker extraordinaire, would remark behind Emily's back, "At least our daughter-in-law can heat up leftovers. It's not like she can make a proper dinner." Emily heard these comments only in hushed tones, but each one stung. Robert Bennett, on the other hand, remained a constant source of reassurance. He would often come home early from tutoring sessions at the local high school, and in the kitchen, amid the hum of the refrigerator and the aroma of Margaret's pork chops, he would sidle up to Emily. He would say, laying a hand gently on her shoulder, "You're doing wonderfully.
Take a breath.
Looks like dinner's on the table, and tomorrow, maybe you'll have time to rest." Even when Margaret offered her critique, "She should stir the gravy lighter, Bob," Robert would gently redirect. "Margaret, Emily's got enough on her plate. Let's keep dinner simple tonight." By late October, Emily felt confident enough to venture beyond the kitchen. She had completed an online course in basic bookkeeping, so now, one afternoon a week, she logged in from a corner of the living room outfitted with a second-hand desk and an old laptop. Karen and Harold Harper's child care center near downtown, where Emily had once volunteered, needed part-time help entering invoices and reconciling bank statements. This arrangement allowed Emily to bring in her own income without leaving Grace's side. Every Wednesday morning, Margaret would watch Grace until Helen and Mark Harper brought her back home around 1 p.m. Walking into the Harper's childcare office for the first time, Emily felt that familiar flutter of nerves. The classroom was bright early fall sunshine, maps on the wall, hand-drawn rainbows by preschoolers taped to the windows. A dozen toddlers napped on colorful mats. As Emily checked in with Mrs. Whitaker, the retired teacher who ran the center, she realized how much she had missed engaging her mind beyond diaper changes and baby burps. Sitting down with spreadsheets, she found pleasure in the rhythmic click of keys as she reconciled receipts. The satisfaction of balancing numbers reminded her of her childhood dream of one day opening her own small accounting practice, though at the moment her priority was supporting her new family. Back at the Bennett house, afternoons were quieter. Josh might come home around 6 p.m., smelling distinctly of coffee and cologne. Sometimes he and Emily would share a quick embrace before he whisked away to his bedroom to change. Grandparents Robert and Margaret would be in the living room, reading the newspaper or watching a local football game. Occasionally Margaret, who lived by a strict afternoon routine, would call for tea time, Emily, and the two women would set out a small tray of cookies and hot tea, her choice of peppermint or Earl Grey. Despite the occasional tension, Emily found moments of genuine warmth. One afternoon, as Grace napped in her nursery, Emily and Margaret shared tea at the kitchen table. Without preamble, Margaret said quietly, "I've been hard on you, and I'm sorry. It's just being a mother-in-law is different than being a mother. I have a lot of ideas about doing things the right way." Emily paused, teacup halfway to her lips. She heard genuine regret in Margaret's voice. "I know you mean well," Emily replied. "I want to do my best for this family, too. I hope we can figure this out together." Tears glistened in Margaret's eyes as she nodded. "Thank you, Emily." That moment, more than any polite acceptance, felt like the first true step toward trust. As November arrived, Emily's bump had grown noticeably. By now, Grace had transitioned from formula to pureed sweet potatoes and soft bananas. Emily woke each morning to the sight of her toddler playing with Scout on the foyer rug, Scout's gentle head nudging at Grace's small hand as if to say, "Good morning." Emily could not help but smile. No matter how tired she felt, most nights, dinner was a family affair. On a typical Tuesday evening in mid-November, the Bennett household gathered around the table. Margaret had prepared her signature beef stew with root vegetables. The savory aroma filled the kitchen as Josh washed his hands at the sink, humming softly. Robert told the edge of his spoon against his soup bowl to gain attention. "Let's remember to go buy new crib sheets for Emily's baby shower this weekend," he said. The Harper family kindly requested the event be held at their home. Emily nodded, exchanging a look with Josh of shared relief. The Harper's home had felt like a safe space, less rigid, more heartfelt, and she trusted her mother's parents implicitly. Margaret set the bowls down before each person. "This stew should give you plenty of energy, dear," she told Emily, patting her belly. "And you, young lady," she added to Grace, "eat your vegetables or no dessert." Grace giggled, poking at a few chunks of carrot before scarfing down a spoonful of stew. Scout patted under the table, hoping for dropped morsels. As they ate, conversation drifted from small talk, commenting on the weather, to more significant topics. Josh cleared his throat. "I have some good news at work. My team's pitch for the new holiday campaign got approved. We start filming in 2 weeks." Margaret smiled. "That's wonderful, son. And the extra hours you've been putting in will help pay for this new baby." Emily felt a soft squeeze on her hand. She knew the coming months would be challenging, caring for a newborn while keeping up with Grace and continuing her bookkeeping work, but Josh's words buoyed her spirit. "I almost managed a small bonus this month, too." As they finished dinner, Robert caught Emily's eye. He offered a small, knowing smile. In that moment, Emily realized the extent of her father-in-law's quiet support. He saw her juggling multiple roles, and he knew she was doing it with a brave heart. After Josh cleaned up the dishes and tucked Grace into bed, Emily and Robert retired to the living room for a quiet glass of apple cider. Margaret, exhausted, retreated to her bedroom to read. In the soft glow of the table lamp, Robert leaned forward. "You're doing a great job, Emily," he said. Raising Grace, preparing for the new baby, bookkeeping, later in life. People take on fewer roles, not more. But you do it all. If ever you need a break, just say the word. I'll be downstairs. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you, Robert. I want everything to work out. For Grace's sake, for Josh's sake. Robert nodded, placing a comforting hand on her arm. Family is about being there for one another. You've done your part, and we're here to help. A comfortable silence settled over the living room. Outside, a few golden leaves drifted lazily to the ground. Inside, the hush between them seemed full of promise, an unspoken agreement that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead as a team. As Emily rose to head back upstairs, she passed Margaret's bedroom door. The warm light peeking out encouraged her to knock gently. Margaret cracked the door open, looking both weary and open. Come in, Margaret invited. Emily took a deep breath and entered the softly lit room. Over a small wooden dresser sat a framed black and white photo of Josh as a toddler, nestled in Robert's arms. Margaret lifted it, brushing a finger across her son's chubby cheek. He was so small, she whispered. Emily approached quietly, resting a hand on Margaret's shoulder. He's pretty big now, Emily said gently. And he's so proud of you. Margaret straightened, placing the frame back. I don't show it often, do I? She admitted. My mind is all about rules and tradition. Thank you, Emily, for reminding me this isn't just about protocol, it's about love. Emily's heart swelled. That means a lot, Mrs. Bennet, she said, her voice soft. Margaret smiled, her stern expression melting into something warmer. Call me Margaret, she said, and the two shared a quiet moment, an unspoken truce. That evening, as a gentle November wind rattled the windows, Emily climbed the stairs to her bedroom, where the nursery lay waiting. Soft pastel curtains framed a crib draped in a gray and white chevron pattern. A mobile with plush stars and moons dangled above a rocking chair. Emily placed her hand on her belly, half agitated, half enraptured by the life growing inside her. She thought of Grace, sleeping peacefully down the hall, of Josh, who loved them both and worked tirelessly to build their future, and of Margaret, who, after so many adjustments, had begun to accept Emily as part of the family. She reminded herself, I can do this. In that quiet moment, a single golden moonbeam cut through the curtains, illuminating Emily's profile. Though the path ahead might be strewn with conflicting expectations, moving bedtime bottles, and more whispered judgments from Margaret, a deeper foundation was forming, one built on Robert's unwavering support and the love Emily shared with Josh. Tomorrow, Emily would rise before dawn to feed Grace and then meet the Harpers at their childcare center for a half-day of bookkeeping. But tonight, she allowed herself one moment of peace. Leaning back in the rocking chair, eyes closed, lulled by Scout's soft snore at her feet and Josh's steady presence beside her. And in that simple surrender to the stillness, Emily felt a surge of hope. A new life was on the way. A second daughter would join them soon. Though she was still learning her role as a daughter-in-law in a household guided by old traditions, Emily Harper knew something vital. Within the warmth of family, she would find her way. By mid-December, the Bennet household had settled into a predictable, if not entirely peaceful, rhythm. Baby Grace was now a bubbly 14-month-old, toddling around in tiny-footed pajamas and uttering her first clear, "Mama" and "Dada." Emily Harper, 25, spent her days balancing freelance bookkeeping work, grocery runs, and toddler tantrums. Josh Bennet, 26, continued logging late nights at Rise and Shine Media, excitedly awaiting his next promotion. Meanwhile, Margaret Bennet, 56, the family's matriarch, had grown increasingly single-minded. Josh, when are you and Emily going to give me a boy? I spent 25 years raising your father. I'd like to see my first grandson before I'm too old to hold him. One chilly afternoon as snow began to fall, Emily returned from running errands a bit earlier than usual. Transitions between day and dusk cast long shadows across the front steps as she unlocked the side door. Josh's silver Honda Accord was parked in its usual spot, but a second, Unfamiliar car, a slate gray sedan, rested half in the driveway, half on the sidewalk. Curiosity pricked at her as she stepped inside. The hallway was quiet, too quiet, she thought. Baby Grace's squeals should have echoed upstairs. Instead, the only sound came from the faint hum of the TV downstairs. Emily's heart fluttered uneasily. She set down her grocery bags on the kitchen counter. As she wiped the condensation off her boots, she heard hushed voices in the living room. Josh's voice, low and measured, followed by a child's voice that sounded terrified. Taking a steadying breath, Emily crept toward the living room doorway. She saw a pair of legs in khakis, Josh's legs, bent slightly as he knelt beside a small boy who stared at Emily wide-eyed. The boy wore a striped soccer jersey and clutched a small toy car against his chest. "Why can't you just stay with me?" the boy whimpered. "I don't want to be here." Josh gently set down the child's hand and replied quietly, "Buddy, I told you. Mom and Dad are just stepping out. I'll pick you up in a bit, okay?" Margaret stood off to the side, arms folded, watching them. Her face was unreadable, but her lips twitched as if resisting a smile. Emily's groceries slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floor as she entered the room. The boy jumped, horror wide in his eyes. "Mom?" Josh's voice cracked with surprise and guilt. "What are you?" The boy blinked at Emily, his small frame huddled as though he might disappear into himself.
"Mom."
"I'm scared," he said softly, reaching out to Emily as if she were a lifeline. "Please take me home." Emily drew in a sharp breath. "Who is this?" She stared at Josh, her voice shaking. "What's his name? Why is he here?" Josh rose slowly, clearing his throat. "This is just nothing." He let out a weak laugh. "I'm babysitting Jeremy Matthews, from my cross-country team. His parents had a last-minute meeting, so he's staying here for a while. That's all." Margaret's mouth curved into a thin smile. "Emily, your son-in-law volunteering to watch a boy was a surprise. I suppose you would have preferred to know ahead of time." "Margaret," Emily said, knees trembling, "Joshua never mentioned this. He never asked if it was okay." She knelt in front of the little boy.
Umbria.
"My name's Emily."
Gracias, mama."
The boy squeezed Emily's hand. "Mom, please take me home." Emily's throat constricted. "What do you mean, home?" she asked the boy gently, turning her gaze back to Margaret. Margaret stepped forward, touching the boy's shoulder. "He's staying with us, dear. His real home is with his parents, but they were called away last minute." The boy's wide brown eyes flicked back to Emily. "I want my mommy. She's coming soon." Emily's heart ached. She stroked the boy's cheek with her fingertip. "It's okay. Look, you just came here for an hour, right? I can set up a few toys." She reached for a Hot Wheels car on the coffee table and handed it to him. "Try this. Mommy always gives me a blue one." The boy's voice was a whisper. Emily bit her lip, glancing back at Josh and Margaret. "I'm sorry, baby. I don't have your exact car here." She tried to coax a smile. "But maybe this one can work?" He shook his head, tearing up. "I want my blue car." Josh stepped forward, running a hand through his hair. I told you just for a little bit. I promise I'll drop him off soon." Margaret cleared her throat. "Emily, it's no cause for drama. We simply offered to help. You two have your hands full with Grace and the new baby on the way." Emily's gaze snapped to her own belly. At 28 weeks pregnant with their second daughter, Olivia, she carefully rubbed her bump. She had almost forgotten the tiny flutter in her abdomen until now, a reminder that her own child would arrive within 11 weeks. She took a steady breath. "Okay, let's get him settled." She led the boy to the play corner of the living room, retrieving a blue Hot Wheels car from a plastic bin. As he smiled, relief washed over her. Every anxious thought, the whispered pressure from Margaret, the guilt over her own overreaction, melted away a bit. Just then, a vehicle door closed outside. Josh rushed to the window and peered out. "That's Mrs. Matthews. She's here. Can you take Jeremy out to her?" As Emily walked toward the front door with the little boy in tow, Margaret followed behind, her posture softer. I'll get Grace ready for bedtime, she offered. I'll see you both shortly. Emily stopped, glancing at Margaret. Thank you. Margaret nodded, a flicker of genuine warmth in her expression before she returned to the kitchen. The cold air bit at Emily's cheeks as she helped the little boy into his coat. He still clutched his tiny blue car. Ready? She asked softly. He nodded, handing her the car before placing his small hand in hers. Stepping onto the frosty front steps, Emily felt a sense of clarity. Despite Margaret's earlier admonitions, "You too need a son." Emily realized that any family needed more than just births. It needed compassion, transparency, and gentle corrections. Holding the boy's hand, she felt a protective surge, as if she were shielding both him and her unborn daughter from a world of unspoken expectations. "As soon as your mom is ready, just take the first left," Emily said when they reached the sidewalk. "Look for the tan house with the big oak tree out front." "Thank you, Mama," the boy whispered, perhaps confusing Emily's kindness for maternal affection. She felt a pang of guilt, because while she yearned for a calm life, full of baby giggles and family dinners, Josh remained under the thumb of Margaret's relentless desire for a grandson. She feared their own second daughter, set to arrive in March, might be unwanted unless Margaret accepted her as wholeheartedly as she'd welcomed Grace. Once the car door closed behind them, Emily turned and trudged back up the walkway. Snowflakes drifted down like confetti. She slipped inside behind a swirling crush of cold air. Inside, Margaret was finishing dinner preparations. Mashed potatoes layering the edges of a black iron skillet filled with roast chicken and green beans. The smell of butter and rosemary popped in Emily's nostrils. Margaret glanced up, meeting Emily's eyes. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but unspoken understanding between them. Then Margaret set down a second plate. Josh should be home soon. Grace needs to eat by 6:30 or she will start howling. Emily nodded, folding her arms around her belly. "Thank you," she said, voice soft. Margaret hesitated. "Emily, if I've been too harsh, I know how much this family means to you. I want to see my grandson." The words tumbled out, vulnerable at last. Emily's heart clenched for her fragile relationship with this woman who was her mother-in-law, yet often felt like a stranger. "Margaret," Emily began carefully, "we love you. But our family is not complete without new life, regardless of gender. Grace is perfect, and soon we'll have another little girl who will also fill our home with love." Margaret's jaw set, but her shoulders slumped as she considered Emily's perspective. Maybe I need time to adjust." Emily smiled gently, lifting the edge of her sweater to rub her bump. "That's all I ask." Josh arrived a few minutes later, juggling Grace in one arm and a small backpack on his shoulder. He embraced Emily around the middle. She rested her head against his chest as he ducked down to kiss her cheek. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly, glancing at Margaret. Emily nodded.
Yes.
"We just sent Jeremy home. He was scared." Josh exhaled. "Thanks for that. I figured he'd be fine, but I didn't want him wandering around alone." Margaret set down a steaming bowl of mashed potatoes. "I told you. You should have mentioned it first." Josh winced and looked apologetically at Emily. "Sorry, Mom. I'll be more careful." Margaret nodded curtly, then paused before softening again. "He seemed grateful to you, Emily." Emily met her gaze with relief and allowed herself a small nod. "He was." Just then, baby Grace began to fuss from the bedroom. Josh stepped away to scoop up his daughter, while Margaret returned her attention to finishing dinner. As they gathered around the table that evening, Grace clutching her sippy cup, Emily gingerly spooning potatoes, and Josh passing green beans, the tension that hovered earlier in the day felt slightly less pronounced. Margaret was no longer clinging to an impossible demand. She was at least listening. Outside, the December snow continued to fall, blanketing the driveway in quiet white. Inside the Bennett home, new possibilities glimmered. The chance to welcome a second daughter, the hope for reconciliation, and the reassurance that even when families err, love could guide them back. And so, as mixed aromas of roast chicken and mashed potatoes filled the Bennett dining room, Emily felt a budding conviction, though tradition might demand a grandson. Her daughters, Grace and the baby on the way, would soon find their own place of honor in this family story. That snowy December evening, Emily and Margaret shared a silent nod of understanding. No further words required. What mattered now was the space between them, narrowing at last. And as Grace babbled in her high chair, Emily realized that the true measure of family was not a child's gender, but the warmth of hearts opening to one another. Emily Harper sat in the kitchen one chilly Tuesday evening, sipping chamomile tea as the sun dipped below the rooftops. She had spent the last few days grappling with a gnawing sense of unease. For months, she'd sensed something was off with Josh. He had grown more distant, his once lively texts reduced to brief, "I'm busy" messages. He was late coming home more often, claiming extra hours at Rise and Shine Media. At first, Emily had chalked it up to career stress. But deep in her bones, she suspected there was more. Earlier that morning, she phoned Josh's mother, Margaret Bennett, ostensibly to confirm arrangements for Grace's upcoming birthday dinner. But when Margaret cheerfully rattled off details about her new nephew, "Oh, Samantha's sweet little boy, Liam. He's just a darling, isn't he?" Emily's breath caught. "A nephew?" she asked, heart pounding. Margaret had been so eager to show off a photograph of a curly-haired toddler, Liam Pierce, to her friends and neighbors. Only later did Emily realize that Margaret believed Liam was Josh's nephew, that Samantha, Josh's co-worker, was part of the Bennett family's inner circle. But Emily knew nothing of any nephew. Her pulse accelerated. She suppressed the urge to collapse right there in the hallway. Instead, she managed an, "Oh, I'd love to see him sometime," and hurried upstairs. All day, her mind spun. Why would Margaret be so enamored with a neighbor's child? Why had Josh never once mentioned babysitting Liam? That evening, when Josh returned well past dinner time, bleary-eyed and smelling faintly of cologne, Emily slid onto the couch beside him. "Hey, he said, brushing a lock of hair behind his ear. "Rough day at work. Sorry I missed dinner." Emily fixed him with a steady gaze. "Josh, who is Liam Pierce?" He froze mid-chew of a peanut butter sandwich. "Liam who?" "The little boy you." Emily swallowed. "Margaret showed me pictures. Said he's your nephew." Josh's jaw tightened. He set his plate aside. "Mom was just being mom. Samantha's boy reminds her of me. That's all." "Samantha?" Emily's voice dropped. She leaned forward. "Samantha Pierce from Rise and Shine?" He exhaled. "Look, my mom likes him because he's cute. She just fusses over him." Emily stared, though her heart clenched. "You never told me you babysat him." Josh's gaze flickered away. "It was just one time, You know how it is, Sam's kid just needed a place to go. I didn't think it was a big deal." Emily's throat felt raw. "Just one time? You've been sneaking off late every other night for extra work?" "I think you need to be honest with me, Josh." He shook his head, standing abruptly. "I'm telling you, it's nothing. Go to bed." "Don't walk away," she said, standing as well. He paused, then left the room without another word. That night, Emily lay awake, thoughts churning. The image of Liam's frightened eyes haunted her. She could not ignore her gut. Something was very wrong. By Wednesday morning, Emily had made up her mind. She could not press Josh further without proof. She needed answers, and only one professional could provide them. She called Redwood Investigations, a discreet private detective agency in downtown Columbus. 2 hours later, she sat in a small conference room, supplied details about Samantha Pierce, co-worker at Rise and Shine Media. She handed over a few phone numbers, addresses, and a recent photo of Samantha. "The more background you can give me," said Trevor Clark, the agency's lead detective, flipping through his notepad, "the better chance I have of finding hard evidence." Emily nodded, describing those fleeting glimpses of Samantha on Josh's phone screen, her casual laugh and glossy dark curls. She admitted Josh had claimed to care for Liam only once, but Emily suspected otherwise. "I just want to know the truth," she said, fingers trembling around her coffee mug. Trevor tapped his pen against the table. Expect calls from me over the next few days. I'll do a quiet background check, surveillance photos, financial records, whatever we can get. That evening, when Josh returned home late again, Emily handed him a printed photograph, one Trevor had discreetly obtained. It depicted Josh and Samantha walking down a dimly lit street, arms around each other, heads turned in conversation. Josh's face went white. He backed away. Where did you get that? Emily's voice was calm, though her heart raced. Trevor got it. I hired him. Josh rubbed his temples. Emily, I can explain. Please do, she said, arms crossed. He ran a hand through his hair. Okay. Samantha and I met up one night for coffee after work, just as friends. That photo is from that night, except I walked her home because she said someone was following her. Emily studied his face for any sign of truth. And what about Liam? He hesitated, then sighed. Liam is Sam's son. I helped her out when her ex was in rehab. Just once. Just once. Emily echoed. Because I have proof. You've been depositing money into Samantha's account for months. Enough to cover daycare, rent, everything. He stared at the photograph, shoulders slumping. It wasn't supposed to happen. It happened? Emily's voice cracked. Josh, this is my home. My daughter. My family. He stared at his shoes, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't plan for it to be anything. After Sam found out she was pregnant, I felt responsible. But it was never physical, just support. Emotional support. I swear. Emily's chest tightened. You've been lying to me. He nodded miserably. I know.
I'm sorry.
The next morning, Emily met Trevor at a local DNA lab. She wore a faded hoodie and jeans, eyes rimmed with fatigue. In the small, sterile waiting area, she held 2 tubes of her own saliva sample, labeled husband's DNA test. Her entire future hinged on this moment. Trevor reemerged, looking more solemn than usual. We got the preliminary results, he said. Samantha's boy, Liam Pierce. He is not Josh's biological son. Emily exhaled a shaky breath, relief and confusion mixing in her chest. That means he's not my daughter's half-brother? Trevor offered a thin smile.
Yes.
But there's more. He handed her an envelope containing bank statements and wire transfers. He's been sending thousands of dollars every month to Samantha's bank account. It's untraceable once it leaves. Emily's vision swam. Why? Trevor shook his head. Only he can say. Stunned, Emily walked home in a daze, envelope clutched against her chest. Through the frost-coated windows of the Bennett house, she saw Josh's car in the driveway, an unwelcome sight. She gathered her courage, stepped inside, and found Margaret in the kitchen, humming as she prepared midday leftovers. Grace lay asleep in her crib upstairs. Emily stepped into the living room. Margaret turned, eyebrows raised. Is everything all right? Emily pointed at the envelope. I know about Liam, and everything you said about him being a nephew. Margaret frowned. That's because your husband told me he was supporting Samantha's son. Emily exhaled. He's not Liam's father. He just quietly funded him for over 2 years. Margaret's lips pressed together. Before she could respond, Josh emerged from his bedroom, bleary-eyed in pajamas. Emily? Mom? What's happening? Emily held out the envelope. I have evidence you've been paying Samantha Pierce.
Why?
Josh. Josh swallowed. I told you I felt guilty, okay? She was alone, scared. She needed help. You lied to me, Emily said tightly. And to our family. Margaret crossed her arms.
Josh.
Is this true? Josh nodded, eyes downcast.
Yes.
I did it. But I just thought I was helping. Margaret placed a hand on his shoulder. Our son made a mistake. Supporting a coworker's child is honorable. But you should have told your wife. She looked at Emily. I understand you're hurt, dear, but let's not endanger our family over a misunderstanding. Emily's heart pounded. She felt trapped between her mother-in-law's loyalty and her own sense of betrayal. There was no misunderstanding, she said, voice trembling. This isn't just money. It's trust. He chose her over me. Josh knelt in front of her, taking her hands.
I love you.
I messed up, but I want to fix this. Before Emily could respond, a loud thump came from upstairs.
Grace door slamshut.
Margaret rushed toward the stairs. Did you hear that? Emily raced up 2 steps at a time. She found Grace sitting on the floor, sobbing, clutching her stuffed elephant. Mommy, she wailed. Grace. Emily scooped her daughter into her arms. What happened? Grace hiccuped between sobs. I heard shouting. Margaret reached the hallway. Concern etched on her face. The walls here are thin, she said quietly. This is not good for her heart. Josh knelt beside Emily on the stairs. Guilt flooded his face. I didn't mean for any of this to affect her, he whispered. Emily held Grace close, calming her. The furniture upholstery that separated Grace's room from the living area did little to muffle harsh words. The reality of what she'd uncovered, the secret financial support, the web of lies, had seeped into her daughter's life. 15 minutes later, with Grace finally soothed at Helen and Mark's house, Emily trudged back to the Bennett home. She found Josh and Margaret in the dining room, the afternoon sunlight casting stretched shadows across the table. On the table lay the DNA report and the bank statements. Margaret smoothed out the report. It's a relief he's not Liam's biological father, she said gently. But you two need to talk this through. I'll watch Grace until you're ready. Josh nodded, eyes hollow. Emily took a shaky breath, standing tall. Something else happened today, she said. When I confronted him, she swallowed. It was too much for you, wasn't it? Before Margaret could reply, she sank into a chair with a muted gasp, her hand flying to her chest. Her eyes fluttered as though caught in sudden pain. Emily and Josh sprang to her side, helping her lower onto the chair. Margaret's voice was quavering. Stay calm. Help. Within moments, Josh was at the phone, dialing 911. Emily knelt beside her mother-in-law, holding her hand, eyes cold with shock while her heart pounded with 1,000 swirling emotions. Margaret, 56 and now collapsing from a stroke, lay rigid for a terrifying second, her carefully maintained composure shattered as her body betrayed her. Sirens wailed in the distance. Josh knelt in front of Margaret, tears in his eyes, whispering, Mom, please stay with us. Emily, face pale, rose slowly. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and called Helen and Mark. Grandma's been she's had a stroke. We need you here. Minutes later, Grace arrived, strapped into her car seat and bundled in a pink snowsuit. Helen carried her inside, where Emily was on the phone with the ambulance dispatcher. Grace looked around, wide-eyed and uncertain. Helen held Grace close. It's okay, sweetheart, Helen whispered. Grandma's just sick. It will be all right. Emily released her breath when the paramedics arrived. As they carefully lifted Margaret onto a stretcher, Josh had to restrain his tears. He turned to Emily, voice hollow. I'm so sorry. Emily, stunned, barely nodded. No words mattered. As the ambulance doors closed, she felt the weight of fractured trust and broken promises settle heavily in her chest. That night, as the snow piled ankle-high outside, Emily sat alone in the living room, clutching the DNA report. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Her mind replayed every devastated look on Grace's face, every pleading glance from the little boy who wasn't Josh's. Margaret's collapse felt like the final shattering of any illusions she had left. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Samantha Pierce. Josh, I'm so sorry about your mom. Let me know if you need anything. I can't believe it all. Emily stared at the message, stunned. On her phone screen, Samantha's name loomed like a ghost. She deleted the text, hands trembling, and set the phone aside. Tomorrow would bring uncomfortable questions from the police, the hospital bills, Margaret's recovery, yet Emily feared that the answers she truly needed would remain elusive. Minutes later, the front door creaked. Josh stepped inside, face drawn and haunted. He closed the door quietly behind him and approached, though Emily had not moved from her spot on the couch. He knelt beside her, voice raw. I didn't tell you because I thought I was doing the right thing. Emily turned her head to look at him, eyes cold but sorrowful. You kept it from me. I was alone every night, wondering why you never came home. And all this time, you were helping her and covering it up. A minute passed in silence. Emily swallowed. I don't know how to trust you again. Josh winced. I know. I understand. Outside, the snow drifted over tire tracks. Inside, two people, bound by love, fear, and betrayal, sat in the hush of a living room forever altered. Emily folded her arms, cradling the DNA report to her chest like a shield. Josh's shoulders slumped as he realized that the path to healing would be long, if it existed at all. And in that fragile moment, Grace's soft snores floated down the hallway, a reminder that life, despite every heartbreak, pressed forward. Yet Emily Harper wondered whether, after the shock of betrayal, crushed trust, and a stroke that left her mother-in-law fighting for her life, their family would ever recover the warmth and peace they had lost. The morning after Margaret Bennett's stroke, the Bennett household felt like a ghost town. Margaret lay in a private room at St. Mary's Medical Center, her strong, added axis of control suddenly stolen by a silent intruder in her brain. Josh Bennett spent each moment by her bedside while Emily Harper stayed home with 14-month-old Grace, pretending that the world hadn't shifted on its axis. Emily had just returned from dropping Grace off at daycare when her phone screen flashed with an urgent message. Emily, is Grace with you?
Dr.
Feldman from Children's Oncology just called. Can you meet us at the hospital right away? Her heart thudded. Emily texted back. I'll be there in 15 minutes. She scooped up Grace, pink-cheeked and oblivious, and raced to check out a daycare. The drive from suburban Dublin to downtown Columbus felt impossibly long, each red light an agonizing moment. When they arrived at Children's Oncology Institute, the front lobby was quiet, almost eerily so. Yet beyond its doors, fluorescent hallways buzzed with quiet activity, nurses in pastel scrubs, parents standing outside exam rooms, small patients clinging to plush toys. A security guard at a desk waved them through. The tense expression on his face hinted at the gravity inside. A nurse met Emily at a corner station. Her eyes were gentle but stark. You must be Emily. Dr. Feldman is expecting you. Down a corridor lined with colorful murals of smiling animals, they reached an examination room where Josh stood, hunched over a clipboard. He looked up, face ashen. Grace clung to Josh's leg, babbling gibberish and prodding the edge of his pant leg. Emily swallowed hard.
How is she?
What did Dr. Feldman say? Dr. Sandra Feldman, a pediatric oncologist whose calm demeanor masked a steel-clad dedication, stepped from behind a curtain holding a manila folder. She offered Emily and Josh a tender, professional smile they both needed. Emily, Josh, Dr. Feldman began, closing the curtain with a soft click. Thank you for coming so quickly. She settled into a swivel chair, placing a gloved hand on a stack of test results. We reviewed Grace's blood work from yesterday. I'm so sorry, but I must confirm that Grace has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. All. Silence thundered through Emily's mind. Her hand flew to her mouth. Leukemia? She's only 14 months old. That seems impossible. Dr. Feldman nodded, eyes softening. I know it's devastating. All is the most common childhood leukemia, but it's still extremely serious. Her red blood cell count is very low. She's anemic. Her white cell count spiked, and specific markers indicate malignant lymphoblasts. We have to start treatment immediately. Josh clenched his fists, voice hoarse. What's the plan? Dr. Feldman opened the folder to a detailed flow chart. We begin an induction phase of chemotherapy right away. That's to push her into remission. We'll use a combination of vincristine, prednisone, and asparaginase. Because she's so young. We'll adjust doses carefully, but we must move quickly. Emily's stomach rolled. She bowed her head to steady herself. Tears threatened. And after induction? If induction gets her into remission, which it usually does, Then we'll continue with consolidation and maintenance phases. But the issue now is a bone marrow transplant may be needed. Her risk category, based on chromosome changes in her leukemic cells, is high risk. That means the chance of relapse is substantial unless we secure a matched donor. Josh exhaled shakily, his gaze fixed on Grace, who fumbled with the hem of his hospital gown. Is there a chance one of us could match? He asked, voice hushed. Dr. Feldman nodded.
Yes.
Typically, first we test siblings, but you only have Grace.
So we test parents.
Statistically, there's a 50% chance one parent can serve as a haploidentical donor, a half match. It's not ideal, but it can work. Emily's breath hitched. We'll do whatever is necessary. She swiped tears away. Dr. Feldman reached across the folder. I know this is overwhelming. We'll take a few hours to stabilize Grace, start her on initial chemo, then run testing on you both. We need to confirm HLA compatibility. If neither of you matches well enough, we'll consult the international registry. But let's hope for a parent match. Early that afternoon, Grace lay on a crisp white hospital bed in the oncology ward, tiny 4 lines taped to both wrists. The chemo nurse, Anna Delgado, smiled as she gently inserted the first bulb of vincristine. Grace's face contorted as the cool fluid entered her veins, but she bit her lip bravely. Emily and Josh held hands, tears streaming, as they watched their daughter endure this painful beginning. Thank you, Emily whispered to Anna as the nurse finished priming the 4. Anna's voice was soothing. She's a strong little girl. We'll keep her comfortable. Once the infusion pump beeped to signal completion, Emily leaned close to Grace's cheek, brushing it with a trembling finger. Mommy's right here, baby. Josh kissed the top of Grace's head. You're doing great, princess. I'll be back soon. He left the room to meet Dr. Feldman at a small, glassed-in consultation office just outside. As Emily watched her husband's retreating figure, fear and resolve wrestled inside her. Fear for her daughter's life. Resolve to do everything in her power to save her. Outside, Josh's phone buzzed with texts from Margaret about her own condition, updates on her recovery, and pleas for reassurance. But his focus was entirely on today's next step, testing. In the consultation room, Dr. Feldman was waiting. Josh slid into a chair. So, what's next? We need HLA typing, she said, passing him forms. Your wife and you will need to have blood drawn. It's a simple process, just 10 vials each. The lab will run DNA-based typing on those samples. We'll have results in about a week. Josh exhaled. Okay. And if I'm a match? If you're an 8 out of 10 or higher match and your health is good, we'll move forward with you as a donor. The marrow harvest procedure requires anesthesia, so you'll be under, and then they'll extract marrow from your pelvic bone via multiple suction sites. It's not fun, but adults generally recover quickly, 2 to 3 weeks to return to normal activities. And if I'm not a match? Josh's shoulders drooped. Then we search the unrelated donor registry. Dr. Feldman replied. It could take longer and the odds of a perfect match drop, but it's still possible. I'm hopeful, though often, one parent can provide marrow for their child, even if it's not a perfect 10 out of 10. Let's pray for the best outcome. Josh swallowed, nodding. Thank you, Dr. Feldman. That evening, as the hospital's fluorescent lights dimmed into night mode, Emily sat beside Grace's bed, stroking her daughter's hair. Grace's once fiery eyes were dulled by the sedatives the nurses had given to ease her discomfort. Each breath sounded faint and tinny as she slept. The chemo would take time to kill off malignant cells, and her tiny body would need all the rest it could muster. Emily closed her eyes and let tears fall. Had she done enough? Would Josh match? Would any of this work in time? In the quiet hallway, Josh paced near the nurse's station, staring at the clock. At 7 p.m., he flicked his phone on, a text from Emily, sent before she fell asleep. I pray your match. Grace needs you. He texted back, I love you both. I'll find out on Friday. Those 2 words, I'll find out, felt like a promise. He sat in a plastic chair and closed his eyes, attempting to consume all the quiet he could muster. Friday arrived nearly as quickly as it had been dreaded. At 10 a.m. Dr. Feldman knocked on the door of room 312, where Emily and Josh stood waiting. Margaret, still recovering from her stroke, had reluctantly agreed to remain at her rehab facility, though she'd insisted on being updated hourly by phone. That morning's call had been especially tense. "Be a donor," Margaret had urged. "Your daughter needs you. This is not negotiable." Now, before Dr. Feldman revealed the results, a hush fell over the room. Grace lay asleep, her tubes still taped to her wrists.
Dr.
Feldman cleared her throat. "Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Bennett, thank you for being here." She paused, scanning their faces. "I'm pleased to tell you Josh is an 8 out of 10 match for Grace's bone marrow." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Josh's knees nearly buckled. I match," he whispered. Dr. Feldman smiled.
Yes.
"It's a significant match, enough that we can proceed with haploidentical transplant. We'll arrange for your donor evaluation tomorrow morning, followed by the marrow harvest. Barring any unforeseen complications, Grace's transplant will take place early next week. We're making every arrangement to keep everyone comfortable." Josh's eyes filled with tears of relief. He closed his eyes, fighting back a wave of emotion, and then stepped toward Emily, wrapping her in an embrace so tight she thought she might dissolve into his arms. "I love you," he murmured. Emily rested her forehead against his shoulder. "Thank you." Late that afternoon, the transplant team wheeled Grace down the corridor, small socked feet dangling off the stretcher, toward the operating suite. Nurses zipped her into a miniature medical gown printed with teddy bears, and a specialized anesthesiologist gently inserted the sedation mask. Her eyes fluttered, and she mumbled, "Mama," before drifting off. Emily hovered at the head of the stretcher until a nurse gently but firmly asked her to wait outside. Josh couldn't bring himself to remain behind with Grace. Instead, he crumpled into a waiting room chair. Emily took a seat beside him, burying her face in her hands while invisible tears stained her hospital gown. Overhead monitors beeped in steady cadence. A large window faced a courtyard at the hospital center, where students from the local elementary school had painted a lion mural. The bright colors felt oddly distant from the emotional storm inside. Minutes stretched into hours. Nurses came in periodically to gently check for lines or tally beads of sweat on Josh's brow. Occasionally, Emily would drift toward the nurse's station, heart thumping in her chest, only to remember that both parents waited their turn, waiting for news. At last, a single knock came at the door. A nurse, black hair pulled into a neat bun, stepped in. "Mrs. Bennett? They've finished the transplant. It went smoothly.
Dr.
Feldman will be in to speak with you shortly." Relief flooded Emily's chest, accompanied by the electric tingle of fear that came with every step toward the unknown. She ran her fingers through her hair, rising to leave the room for a moment. In the hallway, Dr. Feldman awaited them. She asked Josh to step inside first, then beckoned Emily. "The marrow has taken, well, the initial engraftment looks good. We'll keep Grace under intensive monitoring for the next 24 hours, but so far, she's tolerating everything very well." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she clutched Dr. Feldman's gloved hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Dr. Feldman offered a gentle nod. "This is a long road, but we've cleared the first major hurdle." That evening, as snow began to dust the courtyard beyond the window, Josh and Emily finally held hands again. They returned to Grace's room to find the toddler sleeping peacefully. Thin 4 tubes connected to silent pumps. Her cheeks, though small and pale, looked softer beneath the lamplight. Emily rose, placing a gentle kiss on Grace's forehead. The faint rise and fall of her chest felt miraculous. She turned to Josh, closing her eyes. "She's a fighter." Josh nodded, kissing Emily's hand. Just like her mom. Across from them, Grace's pediatric nurse placed a small, white teddy bear at the foot of the bed, a congratulations gift from the transplant committee. On its tag were tiny footprints, a reminder that every step Grace took, every breath, was a victory. Later that night, after Grace drifted into a deeper sleep, Emily and Josh ventured to a quiet corner of the family lounge. Josh frowned at the floor. "I don't know how I'll pay for everything," he admitted. "The hospital bills are already astronomical." Emily exhaled with surprising steadiness. "We'll figure it out. Charity care, insurance, a fundraiser if we have to, whatever it takes." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "For now," Josh said softly, nuzzling her hair, "we should just be grateful. She's alive." The hush that followed was filled with a fragile hope. Overhead, a clock ticked past midnight. Outside, the snowfall turned heavier, washing the world in white. Inside, the dimly lit hospital wards stood silent sentinels as two exhausted parents regained strength in the knowledge that Grace was given her best chance, her life saved, in part, by her father's marrow. In the days that followed, Emily and Josh rotated through shifts at Grace's bedside. Each morning, tubing would be replaced, blood counts measured, and the tiny warrior herself would perk up ever so slightly, eyes brighter, hands patting the blanket as though pledging renewed resilience. At one point, Margaret Bennett, though still weak, visited with a fresh sparkle in her eye. As nurses helped her into a wheelchair, she placed a trembling hand on Grace's frail arm. The moment Grace's fingers curled around Margaret's, every unspoken apology and moment of discord between the families seemed to melt. "You're my hero, Grandma," Grace babbled, lips parted in a small grin. The words were slurred from sedation, yet their tenderness was unmistakable. Tears spilled from Margaret's eyes. "You're my hero, too, baby." And as Emily hovered at the head of the bed, her second daughter's life hanging by threads of medicine and faith, she felt triumph rise within her. In that hospital room, as the sterile lights buzzed overhead, the Bennett family found a well of unity that transcended past mistakes and bitter secrets. The last echo of the four pumps beep in that quiet wing of children's oncology mingled with a newborn hope. Grace would fight on, and the family, though battered, would heal together. Because on that night, amidst blood tests and bone marrow harvests, they discovered something deeper than diagnosis. They discovered the immovable, heartbeat-soft truth that, come what may, love can conquer the darkest of storms. 3 weeks after Grace's successful bone marrow transplant, the Bennett household began to hum with cautious normalcy. The overhead lights in St. Mary's Medical Center had long since returned to their standard daytime brightness, and the upbeat colors of children's oncology faded into memory as Grace regained her energy at home. One crisp Friday morning, Emily Harper stepped onto the Bennett front porch, wearing a light gray cardigan, cradling baby Olivia, born 2 months earlier, against her chest. The air carried the scent of fallen oak leaves and faint with smoke from a neighbor's chimney. As Emily approached the screen door, she paused to take a deep breath. Today marked Grace's post-transplant checkup, but it also signified a day of reckoning for Josh and his mother, Margaret. Josh Bennett emerged from the garage, wearing blue jeans and a freshly pressed button-down. His hair was neatly combed, and he wore a faint smile when he spotted Emily on the porch. "Hey," he said softly. "Ready to go?" Emily nodded, fastening Olivia more securely in a baby sling.
Yes.
"Are you all set?" "Mom's here," he replied, his tone carrying a mix of determination and nervousness. She insisted on coming along. Emily opened the door to find Margaret in the living room, perched nervously on a small ottoman, belongings clutched in her lap. For weeks, Margaret had attended Grace's visits to the hospital's pediatric clinic, learning empathy where once she held only worry. Yet today's tension centered on a different kind of healing, the rift between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Margaret stood when Emily entered. She wore a light lavender sweater, purchased from the hospital gift shop, a get-well present from Grace's nurses. Though paler than usual, her posture was straight, her eyes carrying a newfound softness. "Good morning, Emily," she said quietly.
I'm
ready." Emily offered a small nod. "Good morning, Margaret. Thank you for coming." Josh joined them in the entryway. We'll get Grace checked and then talk, he said. He looked at Emily first, then at Margaret. Sound okay? Both women nodded, and together they drove to St. Mary's Pediatric Clinic in a comfortable silence. Olivia slept soundly against Emily's chest, while Margaret fiddled with her purse. As they entered the waiting room, rows of turquoise chairs, a fluorescent glow overhead, Grace's tiny hand appeared, gripping a stuffed koala. She ran from behind the nurse's desk, eyes lighting up when she saw Emily, Josh, and Margaret. Mommy.
Dad.
Grandma. For a moment, time folded in on itself. The day before tests had shown Grace's white blood cell count was normal, free of leukemic blasts. Today, Dr. Feldman would confirm that Grace remained firmly in remission. But now Grace's ecstatic shout and running embrace took precedence. Margaret knelt to greet her granddaughter. "My brave girl," she whispered, stroking Grace's hair. Emily felt a sudden warmth. This was the grandmother her daughter knew. Yes, but also the woman who once insisted on a son. Here, she was simply Grandma. No adjectives needed. Dr. Feldman appeared in the doorway, holding a clipboard. She smiled broadly at Grace. "Good morning, everyone. And good morning, little Grace. Ready for today's checkup?" "Ready," Grace declared, escorting Emily by the hand to an exam table. Josh squeezed Emily's shoulder and then stepped aside. As Dr. Feldman gently took Grace's vitals, the familiar pulse ox sensor on her finger, the stethoscope's reassuring click, Margaret and Emily sat together on a nearby bench padded with soft vinyl. Neither spoke for a few tense moments. When Dr. Feldman finished the exam, she nodded and tapped her tablet. "Grace's counts are excellent. We're looking at a low-risk profile for long-term remission. I can't say enough how proud I am of her progress." Grace beamed, then turned to Margaret and tapped her small chest. "Grandma." Margaret placed her hand over her heart, tears gathering in her eyes. Then she stood and, to Emily's surprise, moved to embrace her daughter-in-law. Emily rose quickly. "Mom." Margaret pressed a gentle kiss to Emily's cheek. "No more, Mom. I owe you so much, Em." Emily's throat tightened. "Margaret, we've both made mistakes. We just want what's best for Grace and Olivia." Margaret nodded, her eyes glistening. "I understand that now. I was so blind, so caught up in my desires. I forgot what a family truly is." Josh entered, carrying Grace, who happily clutched a brand-new picture book Dr. Feldman had given her. "Looks like we have a lot to celebrate," he said softly. Emily allowed herself a small smile. "We do." Later that afternoon, the Bennetts returned home. Robert Bennett, though retired, he still tutored occasionally at the high school, was already there, seated at the dining table with a stack of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies and a pitcher of lemonade. His gentle eyes brightened at the sight of Margaret, Emily, Josh, and the children. "Welcome home," he said warmly. "I heard the good news." Margaret relievedly sank into a chair.
Yes.
"Grace is officially in remission." She took a piece of cookie and snapped it in half, handing one half to Emily. She paused, searching for words. "I'm sorry for everything." Emily accepted her half. "We're all sorry for our parts. But we move forward, right?" Josh sat beside them, placing his arm around Emily's shoulder. "Right." He then ruffled Grace's hair. "You did it, kiddo." Grace, now 4, giggled. "I'm a superhero." Olivia, nestled in Emily's arms, gurgled in agreement, tiny pudgy fists waving in the air. Robert exhaled, eyes moist with pride. Sometimes a crisis can show you what truly matters. Margaret wiped away a tear. "I see that now. No more demands. No more expectations about sons or daughters. I want every child in this house to be cherished equally." Emily felt her own tears of relief fall. "Thank you, Margaret. That means everything." Across the table, Josh smiled at them both, hope shining in his eyes. That evening, as the sun set in apricot hues, the Bennetts spread picnic blankets on the living room floor, transforming it into a casual play area. Grace and Olivia chased Scout, now a gentle 5-year-old companion, around a circle of board books and stuffed animals. Margaret watched, laughing softly. Emily and Josh sat on one edge of the blanket, shoulders touching. "I know this has been hard," he said quietly, "but I think we've turned a corner." Emily leaned into him.
Yes.
"I feel like we're becoming a true family, beyond tradition, stereotypes, or misplaced pride." Margaret approached, holding a photo album. "I wanted to share this," she said, settling down next to them. She opened the album to a faded page, showing the young Bennett family passing out candy at a Halloween carnival when Josh was about 6, Grace not yet born, Emily not yet in the picture. In the next photo, a teenage Josh and Margaret baked holiday cookies. "This is you, Joshua, at 7, she sighed. On the opposite page was a photo of Robert in his 50s, holding a tiny newborn Josh in his arms while Margaret looked on, eyes shining with maternal love. The years captured in worn edges and yellowed corners. Margaret's fingers brushed the images in a tender gesture. "I once put tradition above love. But this is what matters." Emily reached for Margaret's hand. "Your memories don't have to be only about sons. They're about us as family." Margaret's lips trembled into a small smile, eyes glistening. "Thank you, Emily." As the children piled onto the blanket, Grace demanding that Grandma read the new picture book, Olivia gurgling in delight, the Bennett family felt a quiet joy settle over them. No longer bound by old expectations or the strain of secrets, they had begun to heal. Grace's triumphant remission shone like a beacon, guiding them into a new era of understanding. And though they each carried memories of pain, of betrayal, of fear, they carried something stronger now, a bond forged in crisis and renewed through compassion. That night, as the Bennetts, grandparents, parents, and children, gathered in the living room to enjoy milk and cookies, Robert rose and made a modest toast. "To love. It's the greatest gift we can give each other." Margaret raised her glass of ginger ale, smiling at Emily and then at Josh. "To love," she echoed. In that small, cozy living room, the Bennett family sipped their milk and ginger ale, the warmth of forgiveness and fresh beginnings pulsing through every heart. Despite all they had endured, the spark of love, illuminated by Grace's survival and Margaret's heartfelt apology, kindled a promise. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as one family. 2 months after Grace's triumphant remission and the family's fragile reconciliation, the Bennett household felt almost peaceful. Thanksgiving had brought Emily Harper's extended family and the Harpers into their home. Christmas yielded the first joyful holiday in years. Even Margaret Bennett seemed lighter, spending afternoons baking gingerbread cookies with Grace and reading bedtime stories to baby Olivia. Robert Bennett, now fully recovered from his minor stroke, kept a vigilant eye on his wife while maintaining his gentle support for Emily and Josh. On a late January afternoon, Emily returned from her part-time bookkeeping work at the Harper Child Care Center to find Margaret sitting in the living room, perusing a pamphlet from their local women's health clinic. The basement door to Margaret's craft room lay ajar, and the faint aroma of lavender diffuser oil suggested she'd been in her favorite nook earlier. Margaret looked up as Emily entered through the side door. She said, voice low but clear, "I need you to take me to a doctor tomorrow." Emily's arms tightened around baby Olivia, who was bundled in pink and nodded sleepily. "Of course, Margaret. Are you feeling all right?" She kneeled on the vintage area rug before her mother-in-law. Margaret set the pamphlet aside. I've been feeling out of sorts, exhausted a lot, and I've put on some weight. Just thought, at my age, I'm menopausal, right? Never expected anything else." She eyed Emily with an odd mixture of embarrassment and trepidation. Emily slid a hand under Olivia's chin. "Let's get you into the clinic. They'll run blood work, do an ultrasound. Nothing to worry about." Margaret smiled, her shoulders shrugged in a way Emily recognized from years past, when fear would override common sense. "All right. I'll meet you there at 9 a.m. The following morning, Emily bundled Margaret into the car. Snow flurries drifted down as they pulled out of the driveway. Baby Olivia lulled asleep in her car seat behind. Margaret stared out the window at the white speckled streets, voice barely audible over the heater's hum. "I'm so tired, Em. And my back, you know how stiff I've been." She sighed, curling her fingers around her coat lapel. "I thought it was just old age catching up." Emily reached over and stroked Margaret's hand. "The doctor will know. Let's just get answers." At Westside Women's Health, a small suburban clinic with cheerful posters of smiling mothers and babies taped behind the reception desk. Nurses recognized Margaret as a longtime patient. The receptionist smiled gently. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennett. You're here for your appointment." Margaret nodded. "Yes, Dr. Stevens requested a follow-up based on last month's labs." Emily checked Olivia into the on-site childcare room, where Mrs. Whitaker, Grace's former teacher, greeted her with a warm, "Hey, honey. We'll keep her fed." Emily gave a quick hug to Olivia and slipped back into the waiting area. Margaret sat quietly in the cushiony chair, the magazine rack offering glossy covers featuring healthy seniors doing yoga and laughing families. She flipped absent-mindedly through a headline, "Senior Health, Knowing Your Body's Signals." The irony made her stomach flutter. A familiar medical assistant appeared. "Mrs. Bennett, Dr. Stevens will see you now." In the examining room, sunlit through frosted windows, Dr. Marion Stevens, a kind-faced woman with graying hair pulled into a neat bun, reviewed Margaret's chart and previous lab results. At 55, Margaret was well past menopause, and her hormone levels 2 months prior had confirmed the change. Yet Dr. Stevens's eyebrows lifted slightly as she glanced between the chart and Margaret's cheerful expression. "Good morning, Margaret," Dr. Stevens said, voice professional yet warm. "What brings you in?" Margaret explained her fatigue, unusual weight gain, and persistent lower back pain. "I thought it was just part of getting older," she said. "But I've also been a little queasy." Dr. Stevens tapped her pen against the clipboard. "Okay, let's update some labs and do an ultrasound. I want to be thorough." She listened to Margaret's heart and lung sounds, then examined her abdomen carefully. "Where exactly is the discomfort?" Margaret lifted her shirt just enough for the stethoscope, wincing slightly. "Mostly lower, here," she said, pointing just above her pelvic bone. "It comes and goes." Dr. Stevens nodded. "I want to check your thyroid function again and run a complete panel, liver enzymes, kidney function, CBC, just to rule out any undetected issues. I'll order a transabdominal ultrasound. Be prepared to see something unexpected." Margaret forced a small laugh. "Like I'd be surprised at my age?" Dr. Stevens smiled professionally. "Trust me, I've seen surprises." She walked Margaret to the lab section for blood draws. As the needle pricked Margaret's vein, the older woman squeezed a stress ball, wincing. "I'm really not a fan of needles." "Almost done," the nurse said, pulling out the vial. "You're doing great." Once the labs were drawn, Dr. Stevens took Margaret to the ultrasound suite, a softly lit room with warm-toned walls. The table sat center stage, and a large monitor hung from the ceiling. After applying a generous layer of clear gel on Margaret's abdomen, Dr. Stevens passed the probe over her lower abdomen. The whoosh and hum of the machine was louder than Margaret anticipated. "Try to relax," Dr. Stevens said gently, moving the probe slowly. On the screen, the grayscale image displayed curves and shapes even a layperson could recognize. Dr. Stevens's expression shifted from professional neutrality to one of surprise, an eyebrow rising, her lips parting slightly. She pulled back the probe. Margaret lifted her head, alarmed. "Doctor, is something?" Dr. Stevens cleared her throat, refocusing. "Margaret, I see something here." She pointed at a round, dark shape on the screen. "It's consistent with a gestational sac." Margaret's eyes widened. "Me? Pregnant? At 55. Dr. Stevens nodded slowly, switching to a gentler tone.
Yes.
"I'm very surprised, too. It's quite rare, but not impossible. I'm estimating you're about 8 weeks along." Margaret turned pale, her lips trembled, but she managed a small nod. 8 weeks. Her gaze shifted to the screen. wide with awe and fear. I never expected. Dr. Stevens allowed a brief moment of silence. We'll need to confirm with blood tests, beta HCG levels, and perhaps a more detailed ultrasound. But this appears to be a viable pregnancy. Margaret grasped the edges of the table with trembling hands. I have a daughter-in-law who's already 30 and pregnant with my second granddaughter. My son and I, she trailed off.
Dr.
Stevens offered a reassuring smile. Let's take it one step at a time. I know this is a lot to process, but first we confirm. Then we discuss risks. At 55, pregnancy carries significant challenges: hypertension, gestational diabetes, and certainly the risk of chromosomal anomalies like Down syndrome. But some women do carry to term successfully, with careful monitoring. Tears pricked Margaret's eyes. I just never thought. Dr. Stevens patted her shoulder. You're not alone. Let's get those labs done and schedule a follow-up. We'll consult maternal-fetal medicine specialists for high-risk prenatal care. Back in the waiting room, Emily paced. She'd taken the morning off, hoping for routine results about a mild urinary tract infection that had been bothering Margaret. When the doctor finally emerged, her expression tipped Emily off immediately that something was amiss. Emily, Margaret, Dr. Stevens greeted them. They both rose, moving toward her with apprehensive silence. She cleared her throat, flipping the clipboard closed. I have to share something unexpected. Your mother-in-law is pregnant. Emily blinked, stunned. Pregnant? She looked toward Margaret, who slumped sideways in her chair, the world tilting beneath her. At 55? Margaret nodded, face pale. It seems so. Dr. Stevens offered her a concerned glance. We saw a gestational sac measuring at roughly 8 weeks. I've ordered blood tests to confirm, but the ultrasound image was quite clear. Emily felt relief wash over her. Margaret wasn't suffering from a life-threatening illness. But that relief quickly transformed into shock. Holding her daughter-in-law's hand, she tried to steady herself. This is so unexpected. Margaret swallowed hard. I thought menopause was done. I never expected this.
Dr.
Stevens placed her hand over Margaret's. Let's talk about what this means. At your age, we consider all pregnancies high risk. I'd like you to see Dr. Rajan in maternal-fetal medicine. He'll guide you through specialist monitoring, frequent ultrasounds, diagnostic testing for chromosomal abnormalities like amniocentesis or CVS if you decide, plus consistent check-ins for your blood pressure and glucose levels. Margaret shifted slightly, uncertainty etched on her face. What are the odds of complications?
Dr.
Stevens used a neutral tone to outline the facts. Older mothers have increased risk for preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, and placental issues. Because we saw the baby at 8 weeks. There's a roughly 30 to 40% chance of first trimester miscarriage and a 1 to 2% risk of chromosomal anomalies, compared to under 0.5% in a woman in her early 30s. If you continue the pregnancy, it will require dedicated monitoring. Emily squeezed Margaret's hand. We're here for you, Margaret. Whatever you decide. Margaret's eyes glistened. I need time to think. Dr. Stevens nodded. Of course. In the meantime, you should rest and we'll review your blood work as soon as the results are in. I'll ensure Dr. Rajan has the information to see you next week. Try to take it easy, hydrate, and avoid any strenuous activity. Margaret exhaled shakily. Thank you, Doctor. That evening, the Bennett family gathered in the living room, the fireplace casting a warm glow. Grace and Olivia played side by side on a plush area rug, their giggles an innocent soundtrack to the tension edging the adults. Robert sat in his favorite armchair, feet propped on an ottoman. Sipping chamomile. Margaret sank onto the couch, blanket draped over her legs. She'd finally broken the news to Robert. She didn't want to keep secrets. Especially not after what they'd been through with Grace's illness. His reaction had been a gentle, "Are you certain?" followed by, "We'll figure it out." Yet now, facing his daughters-in-law, the truth felt more precarious. Josh stood beside the couch with his arms folded, unblinking as he watched his mother. Emily knelt on the floor before them, balancing a cup of tea on the coffee table. Margaret exhaled, voice quivering. I was terrified. Because, well, I never thought I'd be pregnant again. Especially at my age. She looked around, meeting each face in turn. Robert, who gave her a solemn nod of support. Josh, who folded himself around her with a protective air. And Emily, whose eyes brimmed with genuine concern. I don't know what to do. Josh knelt in front of Margaret, placing a gentle hand on her knee. Mom, we'll support you.
Whatever you decide, right, Em?
Emily rose and moved next to Margaret on the couch. She placed a hand on Margaret's back. We love you. This is surprising for all of us. But I'll be with you every step of the way. Margaret's lips trembled and she exhaled. I want to try. I never thought I'd have another chance to be a mother, to watch a newborn, to hold my child. Robert cleared his throat softly. It is your choice. And we'll do whatever it takes to keep you and the baby safe. If you decide to continue, we'll revisit our schedules, finances, and support systems. I'll be at your side. Josh knelt and looked up at his mother, voice steady. Mom, it's going to be a long, difficult road. But it's a blessing. If you want this, we're behind you 100%. As tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks, she reached for Robert's hand. Thank you, Robert. And thank you, both of you. She turned to Emily. I know I haven't been easy. Our relationship has had its ups and downs. I'm sorry for the times I made things harder for you and Josh. Emily's throat tightened. You've done so much for us. Especially when I felt helpless with Grace's chemotherapy. I can't say I expected this, but I am here for you. In that moment, the distance that had once separated Emily and Margaret shrank to nothing. As Josh gently scooped Grace into his arms, and baby Olivia gurgled at Robert's feet, the tiny living room transformed into a place of new beginnings, where a grandmother's unexpected pregnancy could rewrite everyone's expectations. Later that night, as the house grew still and the children slept, Emily slipped into bed beside Josh. Did you ever think this would happen? She asked quietly, nestling under the covers. Josh exhaled, pulling her close. Not in a million years. But I feel hopeful. Mom's strong. Mom's determined. He kissed the top of her head. This family's been through a lot. Maybe this is our next step and new chapter. Emily wrapped her arms around his waist. It's wild to imagine another baby. Another Bennett great-grandchild. But weirdly, I'm excited. Josh smiled against her hair. We'll figure it out, just like we did with Grace. And as they closed their eyes, the first snowflakes of dawn dusted the roof, whispering of fresh starts. The Bennett family, once frayed by secrets and pain, now faced an unexpected pregnancy with unity and the promise of unexpected miracles ahead. By early February, the Bennett home was a tapestry of pinks, grays, and soft pastels. Baby Olivia's crib had become a nest of knitted blankets and whimsical mobiles, while Grace's wardrobe brimmed with dresses in every shade of rose. Margaret, 55 and unexpectedly expecting, had moved into the master bedroom's adjoining nursery suite, where her new framed ultrasound print hung next to a tiny wooden elephant-shaped coin bank, the Grandma Fund, set aside for future baby needs. In the guest bedroom, Emily, 29 and 7 months pregnant, hovered around her own supply stash of maternity pillows and sheer birthing planners, preparing for their second daughter's arrival. Though the shared joy of impending motherhood might have bound them, tensions soon flickered into flame. Early one morning, Emily padded down the hall to fetch a glass of water, only to find Margaret at the kitchen counter, carefully peeling an orange and placing each segment into a pristine glass bowl. The countertop glowed with the orange zest's brightness. But Emily saw only Margaret's determined expression. "Good morning," Emily said softly, pulling out a stool. Olivia cooed in her arms. "Did you sleep okay?" Margaret nodded, placing the last slice in the bowl. "I did, actually." She turned, resting a hand on her lower back. "This," she gestured at her abdomen, "hasn't woken me up much." Emily nodded, recalling her own nights of tossing and turning, repositioning pillows.
I'm glad.
She zipped her lips, eyeing the bowl of segments. Are those for you? Margaret arched an eyebrow. Yes, dear. I read that citrus helps with heartburn. She offered the bowl. Want some? Emily hesitated, strapping Olivia in the high chair. She shook her head. I prefer grapefruit in the morning. She turned toward the fridge to grab one. Margaret frowned almost imperceptibly. Very well. She picked up the bowl and retreated to the dining table, eyeing Emily's choice. Downstairs, Josh shuffled into view, sporting a scruffy 5 o'clock shadow. He gave Emily a peck on the cheek. Everything okay up here? He asked, peering at the grapefruit on the counter and the orange segments at the table. Emily smiled. Just breakfast. Margaret shifted on her chair, sliding the bowl off the edge. I thought those were for everyone. You know, for the baby. Emily's fork paused midair. For the baby? Margaret stood, stretching.
Yes.
Vitamin C, you know? I thought I'd share. Emily's back tensed. I prefer grapefruit. The nurse said too much citrus could upset Olivia's stomach when she tries solids. Margaret exhaled, crossing her arms. Then I guess you should have said so. Emily's heart pounded. I didn't think. Josh stepped between them. Mom, it's okay. Let's just eat. The orange segments stayed mostly untouched while Emily settled for a plain yogurt. The undercurrent of frustration, though unspoken, rippled through the room. Later that week, a blizzard blew outside, blanketing Columbus in powdered snow. The city shut down, and even Josh had to work from home. Emily, now nearly 8 months pregnant, reclined on the couch with Olivia. Margaret made herself a cup of peppermint tea in the kitchen. The sudden quiet offered a chance to bridge the gap, so Emily rose to place baby's bouncy seat nearer, hoping for a civil conversation. Margaret sipped her tea, shoulders hunched as she watched Emily. Finally, she spoke. Emily, we need to talk about the nursery. Emily knelt at the coffee table, adjusting Olivia's knitted hat. Sure, Mom. Margaret let out a noise halfway between a sigh and a grunt. You arranged for the nursery theme around little lavender elephants. Beautiful, but she glanced down at her abdomen. I'm not sure where I'll put my baby's things. Emily blinked. She had arranged the nursery months ago. I thought we'd share the nursery? Margaret shook her head.
No.
Your baby will use the nursery I had prepared for Olivia. But she patted her stomach again. I'd like something different for my baby. Confusion flickered across Emily's face. But you're the grandparents. You have the guest room. Margaret stood swiftly, nearly spilling her tea. The guest room? That's for people, not babies. She crossed her arms. I need a proper nursery, Em. I'll be up 5 or 6 times a night. Emily rose, heart pounding. But Mom, I planned everything already. The guest room is already full of baby decorations. Margaret's eyes narrowed. I'll have what I need. You will accommodate me. I can't switch everything around this late, Emily said, voice tight. We're 2 months away from delivery. Margaret advanced. Your baby is safe in her crib. I can use a portable crib in the guest room. Emily swallowed hard, glancing at Olivia on the couch. A portable crib? Margaret nodded.
Yes.
That's what I'll do. The room fell silent, the snow tapping at the windows. By Friday, the tension had expanded. Grandmother and daughter-in-law tiptoed around each other, each remark coded in polite caution. In the afternoon, Emily found her mother, Helen Harper, sorting through baby clothes in the nursery. Look at these, Helen murmured, holding up a tiny lavender onesie. See how cute. Emily resisted the urge to sigh. I know, Mom. It's beautiful. Helen glanced at her with concern. Is everything okay between you and Margaret? Emily rubbed her arm. We're both hormonal and tired. We're doing our best. Helen nodded, placing the onesie back in the drawer. Just remember, you two love each other. It's just, 2 pregnancies at once, with a 25-year age gap. Emily forced a smile. I know, but it's not a competition. Helen reached out, placing her hand on Emily's shoulder. Still, it's going to take some adjusting. That evening, the storms raged outside, and the power flickered briefly before restoring. Margaret emerged from her nursery suite in the master bedroom, carrying a stack of fabric swatches, soft greens, pale blues, and even a whimsical safari animal print. She entered the living room where Emily was feeding Olivia her nightly bottle. Margaret's steps were measured, but her gaze held determination. "I've chosen a theme for my baby's room." Emily kept her eyes fixed on Olivia's latch. "And what theme is that?" Margaret spread the swatches across the coffee table. Cheerful woodland creatures, moss-green walls, accent decals of foxes and owls. "I've already painted a sample. I'll do the rest myself." Emily set Olivia's bottle in its holder. "That's lovely, Mom. But—" Margaret cut in. "But—" Emily took a breath. "I thought we agreed you'd use the guest room. The nursery has already been painted for lavender elephants." Margaret frowned, picking up a green swatch. "Yes, for you. But this is for me. I didn't sign up to share my special space." Emily's eyes flared. "Mom, we all live here. We need to share." Margaret set the swatch down forcefully. "That's easy for you to say, pregnant again, newborn and toddler at home. Wait until you see my bills, my doctor visits. I deserve to have my baby in comfort." Emily's chest heaved. "I deserve comfort, too," she shot back. "This is my home as well." Margaret stepped closer, nostrils flaring. "Your home, or mine?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Olivia's bottle slipped from her lips, spilling warm formula onto Emily's shirt. The infant's cries erupted. Emily dropped to her knees, scooping up her daughter. Margaret turned sharply and retreated to her suite without another word. The next morning, Emily awoke before dawn. She tiptoed to the kitchen, exhausted, and poured herself a mug of coffee. Outside, the snow had settled into a quiet blanket. She sank onto a bar stool, staring at the half-finished mug as guilt crept in. Over recent days, her patience had stretched thin between her own pregnancy discomfort, caring for Olivia and Grace, and these escalating nursery disputes. She heard footsteps above and looked up to see Margaret descending the stairs, dressed in a dark blue fleece and carrying the portable crib that Margaret had assembled overnight. The crib's small wheels rattled as they touched the floor. Margaret positioned it beside the model airplane mobile that hung over the rocking chair. "There," she declared, sweeping her hair back. "It's done. No intrusión." Emily closed her eyes, exhaling. "Thank you for doing that." Margaret gave a curt nod. "We both need space. That's all." She turned on her heel and departed back to her suite, leaving Emily to stare at the simple blue crib standing in the corner. By late afternoon, the mood in the household had shifted. Josh arrived home from a strenuous workday to find Emily keeping Olivia occupied with peekaboo, while Grace built a castle of stuffed animals. The blue portable crib sat silently in the corner, Margaret's official nursery. Josh sank onto the couch next to Emily. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. Emotions flickered in his green eyes, tiredness, worry, and a speck of regret. Emily offered a tenuous smile. "It's okay." Marg's room set up. She stroked Olivia's back as the baby gurgled with delight. "I guess we just need to keep communication open." Josh nodded. "You shouldn't have to compete, Em." "Not compete," Emily interrupted, the frustration in her tone unmistakable. "I just don't want to feel crowded in my own home. I don't want Grace to wake up, walk in, and think Grandma's nursery is hers." Josh sighed, rubbing his temples. "I get it. I'll talk to her. Tonight." That evening, the three of them, Josh, Emily, and Margaret, gathered in the living room while Grace and Olivia slept upstairs. Margaret sat in the armchair beside the portable crib. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, and Josh leaned against the armrest. Margaret closed her eyes, folding her hands. "I know we've had conflicts. I want to apologize. I never meant to make you feel like this is not your home." Emily met her gaze. "Thank you, Mom. I appreciate that." Margaret exhaled slowly. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was scared. I saw the things you and Josh have to plan, and I felt like I deserved a space that was mine just for a while. Josh moved to stand behind his mother. Mom, your family. Always. If I've failed you, I'm sorry. His tone was quiet, but resolute. Margaret let out a breathless laugh. Josh, you've never failed me. But I was stubborn. I'm sorry. Emily. She placed a gentle hand on Emily's knee. I want to be there for you, not fight with you. Emily reached out, covering Margaret's hand with her own. I want that, too. I want us to be a team. For all our babies. Margaret nodded. A team. She looked toward the blue crib. I love lavender elephants, but your baby needs her home. So, if you want to move things around again, I'll call Habitat for Humanity and get help. Emily blinked, surprised by the offer. Mom, really? Margaret pulled her hand back and patted Emily's knee. Your grandchildren come first. Josh stepped forward, placing a hand on both their shoulders. This is our home. All of us. We need to make room, emotionally and physically, for every child here. Margaret exhaled, shoulders relaxing. Agreed. A sense of relief bloomed in the living room. As Emily straightened, she took a moment to imagine Margaret's bright green forest-themed crib sheets and complementing wall decals, then glanced at the lavender elephant-themed crib that Emily had carefully arranged months ago. In that instant, she realized that harmony would come not from forcing identical choices, but from embracing each unique vision in their shared home. In the days that followed, the Bennetts worked together to combine nursery spaces creatively. Moving the lavender crib back to the larger room, creating a shared theme wall of muted pastels and forest greens, balancing oak wood furniture with plush elephant and owl accents. Even the children's stuffed animal menagerie evolved, Olivia's lavender elephant beside Margaret's silver-gray fox. Most importantly, emotions eased. Emily's evenings of gentle yoga stretches were no longer punctuated by silent resentment. Margaret's afternoons of reading Goodnight Moon in the nursery chair were no longer overshadowed by an unspoken sense of ownership. One chilly evening in mid-February, as twilight settled through the lace curtains, Emily found Margaret in the nursery, cradling two fabric swatches, one lavender, one moss green, against painted walls of soft dove gray. Baby Olivia, playing at her feet, laughed as Grace scampered over with a stuffed elephant. Margaret held up the swatches, eyes bright with gratitude. Thank you for helping me find space here, Emily. This all feels right. Emily paused, her own second trimester ache replaced by a comforting resolve. I'm glad, she said softly. I'm excited to meet your baby and mine. Margaret folded both swatches into her arms. And ours together. In that small nursery, bathed in the last light of dusk, two women stood side by side, each at a different stage of motherhood, united by joy and a newfound unity. Outside, snowflakes drifted in the January darkness. Inside, harmony blossomed as their hearts prepared to welcome the newest members of the Bennett family. That night, as Emily and Josh retired to the master bedroom, they paused at the doorway, recalling the tense exchanges of just days before. Josh closed his eyes, breathing in the quiet promise of tomorrow. We did it, he murmured. Emily leaned against him, placing a hand on his chest.
Yes.
We did. Below them, in the softly lit nursery, the first notes of lullaby music drifted through the air, weaving lavender and forest green threads into a tapestry of hope and love, one that would carry the Bennett family through the wonders and surprises yet to come. The first warm day of early spring arrived as a welcome distraction. Pastel tulips peeked through thawed earth, the sky was a clear robin's egg blue, and the Bennetts felt a rare collective sense of peace. Margaret's high-risk pregnancy had progressed smoothly so far, and Emily, now 9 months along, was waiting for her due date.
Josh,
juggling his marketing job and the children, seemed somehow lighter on his feet. Even the nursery, with its melding of lavender elephants and forest green foxes, radiated a fragile harmony that suggested lasting unity. Still, life has a way of tossing surprises when you least expect them. Late one Thursday afternoon, Josh arrived home to find the front door ajar. He gently pushed it open, calling, "Mom?"
Eh?
The house was unusually quiet. In the living room, he discovered Margaret perched on the couch, staring at her smartphone with a tightening expression. Her knitting, a pastel green baby blanket, lay abandoned in her lap. Emily was nowhere in sight. "Mom?" he asked softly. Margaret didn't look up. She traced a finger along the edge of her phone screen. "Josh, you need to see this." Josh sat beside her. On the screen glowed a Facebook post from Springfield Mothers of Multiples, a local parenting group. A photograph had been shared earlier that day. A smiling woman holding a newborn baby labeled with "Welcome, Baby Bennett, 7 pounds, 3 ounces." The caption read, "Congratulations to Margaret Bennett and family on the arrival of her daughter, Violet May. Welcome to the world, Baby Bennett." Josh's heart sank. That was not possible. Margaret's due date wasn't for another month. He stared at the photo. The baby's tiny face, a shock of dark hair, swaddled in a muted green blanket. His own surname was written in large script, apparently borrowed from a hospital announcement. Only one hospital in Columbus used Baby Bennett as a labeling style: St. Mary's, where they had delivered Grace and Olivia. "How?" Josh murmured. Margaret's eyes brimmed. "I don't know who posted it. But look, comments are already rolling in. Welcome to the family, Baby Bennett." Josh grabbed his phone. He scrolled to the bottom. "Who is this from?" he asked aloud, tapping the profile. The post's author was locked behind privacy settings, someone named Stephanie Foley. A quick glance at her profile revealed that she had a single friend in common, an acquaintance of Josh's from the office. Panic flickered in Josh's chest. "Mom, this is false. You're not even due." Margaret's hand shook. "I've been so nervous maybe it's just a prank?" Josh shook his head. He put a steadying hand on Margaret's shoulder.
No.
"Someone's pretending to be a Bennett family member. This is messed up." Margaret swallowed, quieting the tremble in her voice. Why would someone do this? Josh spent the next hour calling a hospital, trying to reach anyone who could verify birth records. At St. Mary's labor and delivery desk, the nurse on duty confirmed there had been no Baby Bennett delivered that morning or at any recent date. "This must be some kind of identity theft or prank," she said kindly. "We'll notify security to look into it." After hanging up, Josh turned to find Emily emerging from the nursery, now carrying a wrapped box of burp cloths. Her face, flushed from climbing the stairs, fell at the sight of Josh's tense expression. "What's wrong?" Josh took a deep breath. Mom's Facebook got a fake birth announcement. "Baby Bennett, born today. But you're not due for weeks." Emily blinked, concern flooding her face. She set the box aside. "Who posted it?" "Some woman named Stephanie Foley," he said, showing her the locked profile on his phone. "Her only connection is through some coworker of mine." Emily felt her pulse quicken. "Mom? Are you okay?" Margaret cleared her throat in the corner.
"I fine, dear."
Emily knelt beside her mother-in-law. "Mom, this is a lie. Someone's messing with you." Margaret lowered her gaze to her lap. "I didn't understand at first. Then the comments. People were sending me virtual gifts and saying, 'Congrats, great-grandma Margaret.'" Josh and Emily exchanged a look. "We'll sort this out," Emily said with forced calm. She slipped an arm around Margaret. "Let's pull up your privacy settings and report the posts." Margaret nodded, relief and lingering embarrassment mixing on her face. That evening, once Grace and Olivia were tucked into bed, Emily and Josh sat with Margaret at the kitchen table, laptops open. They walked through Facebook's privacy settings, blocking the mysterious Stephanie Foley and reporting the post as fraudulent. As notifications piled in, supportive messages from friends of friends, they felt a collective sense of violation. While Emily worked to secure Margaret's online accounts, changing passwords, enabling two-factor authentication, Josh scrolled through Samantha Pierce's social media. He paused. One of her coworkers had liked Margaret's fake birth announcement. This confirmed that the prank had some backing from people who knew about the Bennett's family dynamics.
But why?
Looks like it goes deeper, Josh muttered, showing Emily the like. Samantha. Apparently. Emily frowned. Samantha already overstepped once. Now this. Margaret's eyes flashed at the mention of Samantha. That woman has always had it out for me, she said softly. I thought it was just about helping my grandson. Apparently, she wanted more attention. Emily's jaw clenched. On one hand, she hated to believe Samantha, a former coworker and ostensibly a friend, could be behind this. On the other, she remembered how quickly Samantha's face had fallen the day Dr. Feldman confirmed Margaret was pregnant. I won't let her hurt you again, Emily said. She rose, rolling up her sleeves. Let's gather any evidence, screenshots of likes, comments, anything. We'll bring this to the police if it escalates. Margaret nodded, gripping her mug of chamomile. Thank you, Emily. The next morning, a knock at the front door revealed Detective Rafael Ortiz of the Columbus Police Department's Cybercrimes Unit. He introduced himself to Margaret, Emily, and Josh in the living room. Detective Ortiz. Josh said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. Ortiz nodded politely. I understand your family is dealing with a fraudulent social media post. Can you walk me through what happened? Margaret, Emily, and Josh recounted the timeline. The morning's discovery of the fake birth announcement, the rapid influx of congratulatory posts, and the like from Samantha Pierce's coworker. Ortiz took notes, asking follow-up questions about any previous conflicts with Samantha. When he leaned forward, he asked softly, has Samantha shown any unusual behavior lately? Margaret cleared her throat. She's been overly helpful, offering baby supplies and unsolicited advice.
But now this.
Ortiz nodded gravely. It's possible Samantha's jealousy drove her to orchestrate this. I'll request subscriber logs from the social media platform and see if we can trace the IP address associated with the fraudulent account. We'll also look into possible access from any device belonging to Samantha. Emily's heart pounded with relief. Involvement of the police felt like a step toward closure. Yet she couldn't suppress a flicker of anxiety at the thought of confronting Samantha's vindictiveness head-on. That evening, after Detective Ortiz left, Emily and Josh sat in the nursery, surrounded by cribs and pastel murals, while Margaret rested upstairs. A single lamp lit the rooms with a soft, golden glow. We're not out of the woods yet, Josh said quietly. He paced in front of the lavender crib, then turned to Emily. But at least we're taking action. Emily held Olivia in her arms, whispering to lull her to sleep. I hate that anyone would play with our emotions like this. Especially Samantha. Josh sighed. I know. We'll get through it. For Mom and for the babies. Emily nodded, planting a gentle kiss on Olivia's forehead. This family has weathered a lot. One more storm won't break us. Outside, the wind rustled newly budding cherry blossoms. Inside, the Bennetts watched the future's first soft petals unfurl, determined to face any threat, inside or out, as one protective unit. And though another outside rival had surfaced, the Bennett family's unity, forged through illness, secrets, and unexpected miracles, held firm, ready for whatever trials lay ahead. On a cool spring afternoon, the Bennett household felt more settled than it had in months. The cherry blossoms lining the sidewalk had fully unfurled, their pale pink petals drifting into the lawn like delicate confetti. Inside the home, everything exuded a sense of calm. Grace, now 5, chased Olivia, age 1, around the living room with Scout the dog, while Margaret sat in her favorite rocking chair, feeling her baby girl flutter in utero as she knitted a tiny matching sweater in forest green. Emily, still recovering from her own recent delivery, heard muted giggles from down the hall and smiled at the peace she and Josh had fought so hard to regain. Yet beneath this tranquil surface lay a simmering tension, set to boil over that very evening. Late that afternoon, a knock came at the front door.
Josh,
who had just returned home early from work because he sensed an impending confrontation, opened the door to find Detective Rafael Ortiz standing on the threshold, his expression calm but determined. "Detective," Josh said, stepping aside to let him in. Emily, rocking baby Violet, Margaret's newborn, glanced up from the sofa. "Rafael, hi," she greeted softly, her voice still tinged with baby's milk. "Is everything okay?" Detective Ortiz closed the door behind him and placed a manila folder on the coffee table. "I believe I've uncovered who was behind the fake birth announcement you discovered a few weeks ago." He glanced at Margaret, who rose from her chair to join them, the newborn wrapped in a pale emerald swaddle against her chest. Margaret's brow furrowed. "Go ahead. I'm braced for the news." Raphael sifted through the folder and withdrew a series of printed pages. IP address logs, social media screenshots, and a copy of a retrieved return receipt from Springwood Hospital's email archive. He laid them before the Bennetts. "I tracked the IP address that posted the fraudulent Facebook announcement to a mobile hotspot registered in the name Heather Miller." He paused. Heather Miller is a former co-worker of Samantha Pierce's at Rise and Shine Media. She was laid off last summer. Evidently, Samantha had shared details of your family situation with Heather, including Margaret's pregnancy. Heather created a fake Facebook account under the pseudonym Stephanie Foley. It's a common enough name to appear legitimate, and posted the bogus announcement early morning on March 25th. Emily's heart pounded as she read the documents. A lump rose in her throat. Heather used a VPN to mask her location, but the ISP logs showed that the VPN connection originated from the same mobile plan connected to Heather Miller's phone, Raphael continued. On cross-referencing, my team found she was in Columbus on that date, near a memorial service where Samantha was also present. Now here's the twist. When I checked her residence, I discovered a flyer posted on her front door announcing, "Blessings for the new Bennett baby," complete with the same pastel elephants as your nursery theme. Margaret placed a hand over her heart, shock and anger mingling in her expression. She actually paraded it around like it was legitimate?
Rafael nodded. "Yes."
We also pulled security footage from a courier van that delivered the flyer packets to her house and to Samantha's house down the street. We retrieved 2 video snippets. Heather's face is clearly visible, handing the driver multiple copies of the same pamphlet extolling baby Bennett's arrival. He tapped the still images on the handouts before them. It appears she wanted to publicly announce a baby that didn't exist, claiming it was Margaret's, and spread confusion, perhaps jealousy, since Margaret's health had been a topic of conversation at the office. Josh tensed. But why? What possible gain? Raphael looked at him steadily. My interviewing of Samantha Pierce, who was Heather's close friend, revealed that Heather felt overlooked at work and blamed your family's drama for her own unemployment. She resented that Samantha's child, Liam, had your support while Heather struggled to maintain stability. It's a warped logic. But Heather thought she'd exact revenge by making Margaret seem fraudulent, then go on Facebook Live to claim that Samantha's videos of hospital ultrasound footage were fabricated. Emily stared at the photos, horrified and incredulous. She planned to make it look like a sham in front of everyone, to publicly humiliate Mom. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but her chin stayed lifted. She wanted to steal my pregnancy, she said, voice low, as if she could replace me.
Rafael nodded.
In addition, we found messages on Heather's social media where she referred to Margaret's happiness as leeching joy and labeled the Bennetts as fortune hoarders. She believed that by fabricating a birth, she could tarnish your family's credibility, then perhaps win sympathy and even a job at the company under false pretenses. Josh leaned back, exhaling. This is beyond anything I ever imagined. Raphael slid another set of papers forward. They contained copies of text exchanges between Heather and an unknown number, likely a burner phone, coordinating the timing of the fake announcement with Samantha's departure from the office party on March 24th. Evidence indicated Heather hacked into Samantha's unlocked laptop to capture private pregnancy photos of Margaret's ultrasound, which she then used to lend credibility to her fake announcement. Emily closed her eyes, recalling her anger at Samantha for liking the announcement. So Samantha, she cut in. She didn't intentionally help Heather? Raphael shook his head. From my interview, Samantha was completely blindsided. She provided Heather with hospital photos in confidence, never expecting them to be used maliciously. Margaret rose from her chair, shoulders rigid with indignation. Samantha was a fool to trust her, she said. Then, softer, sorry. Raphael looked at her with compassion. Margaret, you have every right to be upset. What Heather did, hacking into files, hijacking public announcements, constitutes multiple felonies: identity theft, computer fraud, and statutory defamation. We have probable cause for arrest. He handed Josh and Emily a small card with his direct line. If Heather attempts any other online harassment, call me immediately. I'll be filing formal charges once we verify the rest of the evidence. Later that evening, as word of Heather's impending arrest spread among close family and friends, a gathering formed in the Bennett living room. Grace and Olivia played quietly in the corner with Scout darting back and forth, while Robert puttered in the kitchen, preparing snacks. Margaret held Violet, age 3 months, against her chest, rocking gently in her favorite chair. Emily and Josh sat on the couch, hands clasped. A soft knock heralded Samantha Pierce's arrival at the front door. She entered slowly, carrying a sealed envelope addressed to Margaret and a bouquet of pale lilies. Tears welled in her eyes. Margaret, Josh, I wanted to apologize in person. Margaret set Violet in a cushioned bassinet near her rocking chair. She rose stiffly and approached Samantha. Thank you for coming, she said evenly. I know this has been hard on you. Samantha took a steadying breath. I can't tell you how sorry I am. I should have known better than to share your personal information with Heather. I was trying to help, but I never imagined she'd do any of this. Josh's expression softened. We know you didn't, but you share your employer's trust, Samantha. He paused, then turned to Emily. You want to say something? Emily nodded, rising and coming forward. She placed a gentle hand on Samantha's arm. Samantha, thank you for apologizing. Your friendship has meant a lot to us. Through Grace's treatments, you are always a supportive presence. None of us want you to feel blamed for Heather's actions. Samantha exhaled, relief mingled with sorrow in her eyes. She handed the envelope to Margaret. This, she choked up, it's from the rest of the Rise and Shine media team. They sent gift cards and cards for you and your granddaughters. Margaret accepted the envelope, opening a few colorful cards with children's drawings wishing her well. Margaret's eyes shimmered as she read the sentiments. They really care, she whispered. Samantha nodded. They're sorry this happened. They want to support your family. Margaret placed a hand on Samantha's shoulder. I appreciate that. Thank you. Samantha turned to leave, glancing at the assembled family. I'll cooperate fully with the police. I want Heather to be held accountable. Josh escorted her to the door.
Thank you, Samantha,
for standing by us. Over the next 2 days, Detective Ortiz executed a search warrant at Heather Miller's modest apartment. He recovered a laptop containing a trove of incriminating evidence. Heather's deleted drafts of the fraudulent announcement, text logs coordinating with a burner phone, and a collection of stolen ultrasound images in a folder labeled Bennett. Additionally, security footage from her apartment building's lobby camera captured Heather leaving with a stack of self-printed flyers the night before the Facebook post aired. On a bright Saturday morning, uniformed officers escorted Heather into the county prosecutor's office to receive formal charges. She remained silent as the documents were read. Felony charges of unauthorized access to protected medical records, identity theft, and cyberstalking. When asked if she wished to make a statement, Heather shook her head. Her face, drawn and pale beneath her dark hair, betrayed a mixture of guilt and fear. That evening, the Bennetts gathered for a belated spring dinner. Robert had grilled fresh salmon on the deck, and Helen Harper contributed her famous honey-glazed carrots. The family had arranged tables in the backyard beneath strings of lanterns, celebrating both the long-awaited return of warm weather and the restoration of peace. Margaret, radiant in a floral dress that accommodated her growing bump, presided at the head table. Violet lay in her arms, wrapped in a baby blue blanket embroidered with a tiny fox, courtesy of Emily's last-minute finishing stitches. Emily, now home from the hospital herself, sat beside Josh, gently stroking her postpartum belly, a subtle reminder of the newborn daughter who would arrive in just 2 more weeks. Grace and Olivia, oblivious to the undercurrents of adult conversations, chased tiny fireflies around the yard, shrieking with delight. Margaret rose as Robert called for attention. "Family," he began, raising his glass of sparkling cider. "Tonight we celebrate renewal, of health, of trust, and of family. I want to thank everyone who stood by us through thick and thin. To Margaret, whose strength has shown us how resilient love can be. And to all our children and grandchildren, may you know always that this home is yours." Glasses clinked softly in the glow of lantern light. Emily felt tears sting her eyes as she watched Margaret cradle Violet, so small, so precious. In that moment, the memory of Heather's betrayal felt distant, like a storm cloud from which they had emerged unscathed. Across the table, Samantha stood and raised her own glass. "To the Bennett family, especially Margaret, who has endured so much." Her voice wavered. "I'm honored to stand here with you." Josh placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. Margaret smiled warmly, tears glistening.
Thank you, Samantha. Tonight.
"There is no room for anger. Your support has meant the world." Emily leaned into Josh, resting her head on his shoulder. "I think we've turned a corner," she whispered. Josh kissed her cheek. "We have. And with our new babies coming into this world, I feel more hopeful than ever." The following week, Heather Miller faced the judge in a small courtroom filled with sunlight streaming through high windows. She pled guilty to all charges, her defense attorney negotiating a plea that included probation, a restraining order against any contact with the Bennetts, and a requirement to complete community service in an area related to cybersecurity ethics. The judge, noting the impact of her actions on a vulnerable, expectant family, added a stern admonition. Infringing upon another's personal security to exact petty vengeance is a particularly egregious misuse of technology. Heather, head bowed, acknowledged the judgment. Back home, the Bennetts huddled around the television as the local news reported on Heather's sentencing. Margaret, pacing the living room, exhaled a sigh of relief when the screen flashed an image of Heather entering the courthouse in handcuffs. In the foyer, Emily held a small lavender elephant figurine she planned to gift to the newest family member, her soon-to-arrive baby girl. She looked at Margaret, who gently touched her own womb.
"Mom,"
Emily said softly, "It's over." Margaret smiled, the weight of recent months lifting from her shoulders. "It is, dear. And now we can just be." Late in March, a crisp Saturday dawned as the Bennetts prepared for the homecoming of 2 new baby girls. Emily had gone into labor the previous night, delivering a healthy 7-pound, 4-ounce daughter, Hazel May Bennett, at 6:15 a.m. Meanwhile, Margaret, with Dr. Feldman's close supervision and a nurse at her side, welcomed her own baby, Aurora Jade Bennett, at 8:43 a.m., weighing 5 pounds, 13 ounces. Both mothers recovered in parallel hospital rooms at St. Mary's, their rooms separated only by sliding glass doors they had taped with "Welcome Home" signs. At precisely 11 a.m., the sliding doors opened simultaneously as the Bennett family, Robert, Helen, and Josh, shuttled Hazel and Aurora into the family minivan, their delicate bundles wrapped in pastel blankets. The Bennett home awaited their return, the nursery overflowing with welcome gifts, lavender plush elephants, fox print swaddles, and hand-knitted hats in shades of mint and mauve. On the front porch, Robert stood proudly, camera in hand. He motioned for Josh to step forward. As Josh carried Hazel in his arms and Margaret followed with Aurora in her arms, the entire family held their breath at the perfect moment for the photograph, Margaret's face aglow, Emily wiping a tear, Grace and Olivia waving excitedly, and behind them, 2 identical cribs waiting for each new daughter. Click, Robert captured the moment. Inside, the nursery brimmed with soft lanterns. wall decals of woodland critters and lavender elephants side by side. Emily knelt near the lavender crib to place Hazel inside, mumbling, "Welcome home, my little lavender lady." In the adjacent niche, Margaret carefully tucked Aurora into the forest green crib, whispering, "Sleep well, my precious fox baby." Afterward, the Bennets gathered in the living room for a celebratory meal: homemade chicken pot pie, glazed carrots, and a towering two-tiered cake decorated with sugar flowers in pink and green. Everyone had a seat at the table, from grandparents Robert and Helen to the tandem baby cribs, symbolizing the reunion of two generations. Margaret cleared her throat before raising a glass of sparkling lemonade. "Family, today has shown me that love and forgiveness can heal even the worst wounds. We welcome Hazel and Aurora with all our hearts. May your lives be as full of warmth as this home is tonight." Emily, cradling Hazel, joined Margaret by raising her own glass. "To new beginnings. To a future free of betrayal or secrets. Welcome home, little girls." Glasses touched in the soft glow of the chandelier, and a cheer went up as Grace and Olivia ran around in laughter while Scout barked happily at their heels. In that moment, the Bennet family, woven tight by adversity, united by hope, embraced the promise of tomorrow. As shadows danced across the walls and lantern light flickered, they realized that the storms they had weathered only served to make their bond stronger. And so, with Hazel May Bennett and Aurora Jade Bennett sleeping peacefully in nursery cribs mere feet apart, the Bennets stepped confidently into their next chapter, no longer haunted by past betrayals, but instead inspired by the unwavering, restorative power of love. Nearly a year had passed, and the Bennett household felt more vibrant than ever before. Late spring sunlight filtered through lace curtains, illuminating the living room where pastel coffee table books sat stacked beside framed photographs, Grace's kindergarten graduation, Olivia's preschool recital, and the baptisms of Violet, and even a glimpse of Aurora's first smile. Nothing seemed out of place. The kitchen's aroma overflowed with freshly baked banana bread, Robert's specialty, while Helen Harper prepared a pitcher of homemade lemonade.
Outside,
a gentle breeze carried the scent of cherry blossoms in full bloom across the front lawn, and Scout, their aging golden retriever, dozed in a sunspot on the hardwood floor, dreaming of chasing squirrels. On that morning, as the family gathered around a long picnic table set in the backyard beneath strung lanterns, no one spoke of the trials that had once threatened to tear them apart. Margaret Bennett, now 56 and glowing, held Aurora Jade, 3 months old, in her lap. Aurora's tiny hand curled around a handmade fox-themed blanket, knitted by Emily during nights of laughter and crocheting. Beside her sat Helen, her bright smile reflecting the countless times she had offered comfort and childcare. At the opposite end of the table, Josh and Emily Harper, ages 32 and 30, watched their son, Liam, and nephew William scrawl chalk on the sidewalk, scribbling doodles of elephant and fox figures that echoed the nursery decor. Emily held Hazel May, their 6-month-old daughter, tucked in the crook of her arm. Hazel's rosy cheeks and sparkling eyes darted toward the colorful spring blossoms, as though absorbing every petal's fragrance. Next to them, Grace, now 6 and teetering on the verge of a classroom of first graders, chased after Olivia, age 2, whose squeals of delight calmed the stormy clouds of recent memory. The children's laughter mingled with the soft chirping of birds and the distant hum of lawn mowers, weaving a tapestry of joy that felt all the more precious after everything they had endured. From the shaded pergola roof, a banner fluttered in the breeze, printed in soft greens and lavenders. "Welcome home, Hazel and Aurora." Under it, an array of cupcakes decorated with edible flowers and hand-painted icing elephants and foxes beckoned. Nearby, baskets of pastel candies sat alongside pitchers of iced tea, lemonade, and mint water. The tablecloth bore the imprint of countless meals and memories, but it looked brand new beneath the golden morning light, reminding everyone that, like the tablecloth, they too had been made clean, rewoven with threads of forgiveness and fresh hope. Margaret rose, placing a gentle hand on the back of her rocking chair. As the matriarch, she had a few words to say. "Family, I want to thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady and warm. "Today we celebrate not only the arrivals of Aurora and Hazel, but also the love that bound us through every storm. When we first learned of my pregnancy last year, I never imagined having another baby at 55. And when Emily's daughter joined us, I thought I knew what miracles looked like. But each of you, my son, my daughter-in-law, my dear grandchildren, even friends like Samantha and Detective Ortiz, helped weave a net of support tighter than any fear.
Now,
As we stand under these cherry blossoms, I feel more grateful than I ever have in my life. Let us raise a toast to new beginnings, to forgiveness, and to the unwavering power of family." With that, glasses of lemonade clinked together and echoes of "to family" rose into the azure sky. Everyone paused to drink, savoring the citrus sweetness that seemed to symbolize the tangy, unexpected adventures they had shared. The children, unburdened by adult formalities, resumed their chalk drawings. Grace etched a lavender elephant, tracing each wrinkle of its trunk with scientific precision. Olivia, tumbly and giggly, attempted her own version of a fox, tail and all. Masterfully, Scout danced between their legs, pleased to be included in the impromptu art session. Later, as the afternoon sun warmed their backs, Josh and Emily leaned on the fence, taking in the scene. Emily's newly postpartum waist still bore the curve of motherhood, but her eyes shone with an inner glow. "I still can't believe how far we've come," she whispered, leaning into Josh's shoulder. "It's almost surreal." Josh kissed the top of her head. "We had our share of storms, but I wouldn't trade this for anything. Look at them, Hazel and Aurora together. Like two tiny sisters woven from different fabrics, but fitting under the same quilt." His gaze drifted to Margaret, who stood nearby, cooing as Aurora pressed her small face into the fox blanket. "Mom's been incredible. She claimed I was the luckiest man alive, but I think we all are." Emily turned to smile at him, reached out, and laid a hand on his chest. Feeling the steady beat of his heart, a heart that had grown with every twist and turn their family had faced.
we are, she agreed.
And now, with these little ones, our family story truly begins a new chapter. Meanwhile, the last of the picnic plates had been cleared. Grace had taught Olivia how to climb the small wooden play structure, and Scout had trotted off to greet neighbors who passed by on the sidewalk. Margaret observed it all with silent pride. She thought back to the months of worry, her high-risk pregnancy, the fake birth announcement that had threatened to steal her joy, and the confrontation with Heather Miller that had tested her faith in others. How far they had come, and how much they had forgiven. She rose and made her way towards Samantha Pierce, who sat quietly on a picnic blanket, gently bouncing Violet in her lap. Samantha had become like a member of the Bennett family ever since she had provided crucial testimony in court, and then offered her own children as playmates and reassurance. Now, as she held Violet, Samantha looked up and met Margaret's gaze. Without words, Margaret offered a gentle nod, an unspoken thank you. Samantha squeezed Margaret's hand, tears glimmering in her eyes. She had felt guilt for sharing a private ultrasound with Heather, but Margaret's forgiveness had become a bridge that led them both forward. Back at the picnic table, Robert and Helen faced one another, hands intertwined, grandparents who had watched the most spectacular unraveling of their family tapestry and then its careful mending. Robert took a sip of lemonade and looked around. "You know," he said quietly, "I can't imagine a better place to be." Helen smiled, her eyes crinkling at the edges. "We raised our children, watched them become parents, and now we get to see our grandchildren and great-grandchildren flourish. I always dreamed of this." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Everything we went through, it was worth it." Across from them, Emily lifted Hazel into her arms, gently bouncing her so that Hazel's chubby legs swayed beneath a pale green sock. Hazel's soft coos echoed through the yard, and Aurora reached out, tiny fingers grabbing at the knitted fox rattle. Margaret shifted in her rocking chair to accommodate Aurora, singing, You are my sunshine, so softly that only Aurora and perhaps the humming bees in the budding garden could hear. As afternoon gave way to early evening, the lanterns above the picnic table flickered with a warm glow. The children had been called in for baths, glimpsed here and there through the open back door in bunny pajamas. A gentle hush fell over the yard as Robert guided Josh toward the house, beckoning for a closing photograph, the 4 generations of Bennets, illuminated by lantern light. Standing under the cherry blossom arch. In the photo frame, Emily stood on the left holding Hazel, next to Josh with Grace by his side, while Margaret cradled Aurora on the right. And Helen and Robert balanced in the center. Above them, cherry blossom petals drifted like confetti. Everyone watched the cameras flash, smiles bright as the first star of night began to flicker in the evening sky. When the shutter clicked, it captured more than a moment. It trapped the essence of what they had endured and overcome. There was Margaret's resolute joy, Emily's tender love, Josh's protective pride, Robert's grandfatherly warmth, Helen's grandmotherly wisdom, and the pure happiness in Grace, Olivia, Hazel, and Aurora's eyes. In that single photograph, all pain and conflict melted into something richer, an affirmation that when love anchors every decision, a truly happy ending is not a finish line, but a beginning. As the family dispersed for bedtime routines, each member carried a sense of contentment that only comes from being part of something greater than oneself. In the nursery, Hazel drifted into sleep, lulled by the lavender elephant mobile, while Aurora slept under the watchful gaze of fox decals, each pattern carefully chosen by those who cared enough to stitch together a new legacy. Below, Margaret lingered a moment, catching the laughter of her grandchildren echoing through the hallway. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath of jasmine-laced air, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she believed that true peace could hold. The house on Cedar Lane, once a battleground of secrets and fear, had become a sanctuary of forgiveness and hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, first steps, first words, the next milestones that every grandparent and parent eagerly awaited. But for now, in the soft glow of early evening, the Bennets simply allowed themselves to be present. They had written the last chapter of their darkest days, and now the next chapter, full of promise and love, began. Under the ancient cherry trees, their petals swirling in swirls of pale pink, the Bennet family stood together, united, healed, and wholly at peace. A truly happy ending. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.